My grandfather is the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, Taking a Day Off. I feel that my recent writings are not good enough, and there are fewer people commenting and complaining. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to stick to the style of my early days. Tomorrow I will write about my companions too. Chapter 27, Companions, 2. At this time, a British merchant was trying every means to lower the purchase price of grain, while an American merchant on the other side was trying every means to sell the low-quality grain he had hoarded. In the end, they reached a deal. The British got the price they wanted, and the Americans could clear out their overstocked stocks. A box of grain with deadly bacteria in Boston was sent from here to Great Britain, and it would cause a huge disaster that killed millions of people a few years later. Maste Ferretti was born in Senegalia in 1792, the second son of a minor noble. He suffered from epilepsy since childhood, which almost dashed his mother's hope of making him a priest. At this time, priests in the Papal States had great power and could enter any house in the parish, similar to a community, at any time and determine whether the church's teachings were followed. They had the right to hire spies to check the people in the parish, and even directly ordered the police to search. Those who dared to offend priests were usually arrested and thrown into dungeons, and after several months of torture, they were brought to court for trial. The most terrifying thing is that the priests themselves are judges, and the testimony of priests is almost irrefutable. In 1809, Napoleon swept across Italy, and the Roman seminary where Maste Ferretti was studying was subsequently closed. It was not until 1814 that he was able to continue his studies in theology. Maste Ferretti himself was a person with limited interest in learning. He never thought that his theological and cultural knowledge was at a high level, and this was indeed the case. In 1818, he still became a priest, but considering his occasional epilepsy, he could only preside over the Mass with the assistance of other clergy. When the uprising against the Holy See occurred in 1831, Maste Ferretti did not realize the seriousness of the problem at all. All the rioters in Perugia, Foligno, Spoleto and Terni are no more than 500 people. There is no uniform, no leadership, no courage, and this group of people has no ability to scare anyone. Then this mob of 500 defeated the 12,000 papal army in Bologna, and soon grew to thousands of people, and he himself fled to Naples. Fortunately, the Secretary of State of the Holy See sought help from the Austrian Empire, and the Austrian army quickly took control of the situation. Maste Ferretti attributed the failure to his epileptic seizure. He served as bishop in Imola, and his suppression of local priests earned him a good reputation, and his liberal remarks were also praised. At this time, no one would have thought that this unknown little man would rise to the pinnacle of power in the Papal States. But this also laid the groundwork for his future experience. At that time, on the island of New Zealand in Oceania, facing the indigenous people on the island, the general of the Great Ying Empire shouted, "Warriors of Great Britain, the rise and fall of the empire, this battle. Charge!" But this time they did not use rifles and bayonets, but capital and deception. The Maori people are martial and decisively chose to resist when the British invaded. They did not lose the war, so they won a relatively equal treaty for themselves. In India, the former monarch of the Sikhs, Ranjit Singh, built a powerful new army at all costs in order to simultaneously support the threats from Afghanistan and Britain. He hired French veterans who had experienced the Napoleonic Wars to train his soldiers, and the cavalry and artillery also learned from the French army. During his reign, the Sikhs had 14 artillery regiments, 192 artillery pieces and 4,500 artillerymen. Soldiers received their salaries directly from the treasury, rather than the traditional distribution by local lords. This strengthened the central government's control over the army, prevented the emergence of local separatist forces, and maintained the combat effectiveness of the army while maintaining stable military pay. The power of the Immortal Army was suppressed, but the power of the Khalsa of the Royal Guards was continuously expanded, which later became one of the unstable factors in the empire. The young monarch who had just succeeded to the throne was unable to pay the huge expenses of the Khalsa, nor did he have the ability to control the Khalsa, nor did he have the ambitions of the previous king. So the new monarch chose to lie down, built a luxurious courtyard for himself, and spent extravagantly from then on. The sky was clear and the sun was setting. Three teenagers played carefree on the hillside. In the gorgeous courtyard at the foot of the mountain, an old man in gorgeous clothes was sighing alone. The British are too overbearing. If a prince dies and has no son to inherit the throne, his land will be abolished, and everything on the land will belong to the British. I am already old, and I have only given birth to daughters. My wives are also old. It seems that I have to marry some more. Thank you for your hard work for Zhangzai. The old man in gorgeous clothes was a little apologetic. It doesn't matter, as long as we can keep the foundation of our ancestors. It's worth it even if I die of exhaustion. How can there be such shameless people? The three teenagers who just came back thought in their hearts. Among the three teenagers, there's a girl and two boys. What the girl didn't know was that in the future, she would marry this shameless old man in her mouth, and die generously to protect his foundation and people. Old Johann Strauss was the absolute overlord of the music world of this era. Old Johann Strauss was born in a poor family. He was exposed to music very early, and often used hats and plates to collect bounties from musicians who played in his restaurant. Later, his parents used their savings to buy him a violin, and he began to play with musicians everywhere. Later, he met Joseph Lanner, and the two had experienced poverty together. It is said that when they were the poorest, they could only order one meal and only one shirt to wear in turn. When one person wore a shirt, the other had to cover his body with a torn sack. But they soon became famous, and the two parted ways. His band first conquered Vienna, and then Paris. In 1838, Strauss left France for England. On June 28, the 19-year-old Queen Victoria held a coronation ceremony. Mr. Johann Strauss of Vienna received a triumphal welcome at the ceremony. He and his band presented the Queen with the song God Save the Queen. After that, Johann Strauss became more and more famous, so much so that someone said in the newspaper that he came to London not to crown the Queen, but to crown him, the Napoleon of the music world. Johann Strauss's fame reached its peak, and he still had a goal in front of him, to separate dance music from dance and elevate it to the realm of absolute music. But he was destined to fail to achieve this goal. The one who could achieve this goal was another genius of his time, his son Johann Strauss Jr. Johann Strauss Jr., who wrote his first piece First Imagination when he first learned the piano at the age of 6. However, he never touched any musical instrument again after several years. The latest novel will be released on the 6th-9th book bar. Because his father Johann Strauss Sr. said, being a musician is a very unstable, socially unprivileged, difficult and painful profession. Most musicians cannot make a living by playing and have to go out to work, be servants, or be waiters in bars, but Johann Strauss Jr.'s mother thought her son was a genius. Finally, when Johann Strauss Jr. was 10 years old, she gave him a violin. Johann Strauss Jr. played like a professional for the first time. He thought about the countless audiences he would face in the future and tried his best to make beautiful gestures. His family was also intoxicated by his performance. Only Johann Strauss Sr. rushed forward in anger, snatched the violin from his son's hand and smashed it to pieces. Because Johann Strauss Sr. was clearly aware of his son's talent, a talent that could pull him down from the altar. There was a time when Johann Strauss Jr. admired his father infinitely. The newspapers told how his father walked through the hall to the stage, how he picked up the violin and made everyone as if possessed and intoxicated. But Johann's love affair had affected his family. Later, Johann Sr. actually abandoned his wife and family for a coquettish seamstress. Johann Sr. traveled around the world with this woman, leaving his wife and children in Vienna. Johann Strauss Jr. decided not to listen to his father anymore. He wanted to challenge this Napoleon of the music world. Joseph Parker built a greenhouse out of glass for his little daughter, which gave him inspiration. He kissed and hugged his little daughter, and lifted her up high. Until the servant who thought he was crazy stopped him. He was inexplicably excited because he knew that he would shock the whole world in the future. The weather was clear and sunny at the seaside, and there were a few seagulls flying in the sky. A young man wearing a top hat, a monocle, and holding an umbrella on a sunny day lowered his top hat and said, "I come, I see, I conquer." This man is not very smart. The sailors on the side talked about it. The captain said, "I swear to God, if you don't get on the boat again, I will kick you on with my new boots bought for $5. Wait a minute, I clearly booked a first-class cabin." "Why do you want me to live with potatoes?" the young man asked. "What first-class cabin? You only pay $25. If you want to live in the cabin, you have to pay another $25. If you don't have money, You have to live with potatoes, the captain replied. Damn Italian bastard, you cheated me again, the young man cursed in his heart. For the last time, are you going to leave or not? The captain was a little impatient. Okay, I'll go. The young man walked onto the plank holding an umbrella. It's sunny, why are you holding an umbrella? The sailors laughed at the young man who looked out of place. There are always unexpected events, the young man said lightly. A seagull flew over, and a cloud of water fell on the sailor's head. This time it was written in vernacular. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 The Mess 1. Milosh and Luchiki came to Vienna again. This time they learned to be smart. First, they bribed Prince Metten's old butler with money. Then they carried out a series of god-level operations. One day, Prince Metten returned to the mansion exhausted after a day of useless quarrels with Count Corlet. As soon as he entered the door, he found that the old butler Berg was mysterious. Berg, just tell me what's the matter. I've been busy all day and want to rest. Yes, Your Highness. Someone sent 3 boxes today, but they are filled with good things. I have sent them to your room. Oh? Really? Who sent them? This. He said you will know when you see it. Dare you accept something without asking clearly? Berg, you have been with me for so many years, why are you still so heartless? Return it to me immediately. Metten was a little angry. If this old butler had not been with me for 30 years, I really wanted to kick him out. But it was precisely because this old guy was so heartless after following me for 30 years that I was even more angry. But they left the box and went away, the old butler said helplessly. How much benefit did you receive from them? The old butler took out a gold bar from his pocket. You sold out your master for a gold bar. Metten was even more angry. Berg took out another gold bar from another pocket. 2. Berg took off his shoes and took out a stack of banknotes from them. I really don't have any, master. If it happens again, I will stick all these things into your anus, tie your hands and feet together and throw you into the Danube, Metten threatened angrily. Berg knew that Prince Metten had let him go, and hurriedly thanked him, because he knew that the prince would not say so much nonsense if he really wanted to do it. Berg hid the gold bars and banknotes in his pocket and trotted away. Metten was also very curious about who was so generous. He bribed his butler so much to give him a gift. He was even more curious about what the gift was. After taking a bath, Metten had dinner with his family. Richard's academic performance was okay, but he was a little estranged from the crown prince because of Taffy. Richard, you have to understand one thing. I am a high-ranking official, and our family is now honored. But you have to understand where our power comes from. Franz is the next emperor. This is the consensus of the entire empire's top leaders. If there is no precedent, he would be now. Yes, father. It's just that Taffy insulted you and your policies. Richard was still very afraid of his father. Haha, it's just a child's joke. A little intolerance will ruin a big plan. Look at history, which great man is not praised by the world and slandered by the world? If he is not envied, he is mediocre, but Archduke John's approach is indeed problematic. You have to see clearly that Franz stood up at the first time to prevent things from developing in an unmanageable direction. He will undoubtedly be a superior in the future, after teaching his son a lesson and spending some time with his aunt wife. He returned to the study, and then he found 3 boxes on the desk in the study. The boxes were made of high-quality wood, and the gaps were sealed. What is this? And it needs to be sealed. Metten was nervous, but decided to open the box to see what was inside. When the box was opened, it was a human head treated with lime, with a gold bar in its mouth. Metten almost vomited the food he had just eaten. He roared in anger, Berg, call Berg here. Now. The servants heard Metten's roar and immediately went to find the butler Berg. Berg was counting the money he got today in the room and was happy. As soon as Berg entered the door, a wooden box hid him. He instinctively caught it with his hands and found that it was a human head covered with lime. Berg and the human head looked at each other and almost cried out. But he immediately realized that something bad had happened. Master, I really don't know what's inside. They told me that it was filled with golden letters, Berg argued. Don't know? You dare to accept it without knowing? If there's a bomb inside, will you go to heaven to explain to me? Metten still held a letter of recommendation from Milosh in his hand. Master, for God's sake, I really don't know. Berg knelt on the ground and begged. Enough, how many times have I said it? I don't care about the mess in Serbia, and I won't see anyone from any side. Are you deaf? Now you have made a mess, you have to clean it up yourself. I will send them back now. Berg hurriedly gathered a few boxes and wanted to move them out. Close the lid and call a few more reliable people. Seeing Berg holding the box and wanting to leave directly, Med reminded angrily. Yes. Berg carefully closed the box and called 2 confidants, and tiptoed to move the box out of the room, fearing that he would accidentally do something wrong and anger the prince. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. The young man at the side asked in confusion, Mr. Berg, what is in it that is so heavy? Are you going to die by asking so many questions? Berg slapped the young man on the head. Don't ask questions that you shouldn't ask. This young man was sent by a distant relative of Berg about half a year ago. It is said that he is an illegitimate child, but he is usually hardworking and smart. Berg likes this young man very much, and has been keeping him by his side and is planning to marry his mentally retarded daughter to him. The young man rubbed his head and said, I know, Mr. Berg, but the young man didn't walk a few steps before he said that he had a stomachache and needed to go to the toilet. Berg stamped his feet and said, Go quickly, why are there so many poops and farts today? Maybe I had a stomach ache yesterday. The young man was about to leave with a box. Hey? What's going on? Why do you bring a box to the toilet? Put it down, I told you to put it down. Berg became even more angry. This young man is not like this usually. Why is he so clumsy today when there is something going on? It seems that he needs to be trained. The young man hesitated for a moment, then put down the box and ran away. After a quarter of an hour, the young man still didn't come back. Damn, you got sucked into the toilet? Never mind. Go get some people to prepare the carriage. Let's go to the Caesar Hotel. The Caesar Hotel was the largest hotel in Vienna at that time. It was home to visiting dignitaries and their mistresses. There were also wealthy Jews who had low social status. Solomon Rothschild was one of them. He was the second son of Mayer Rothschild. As the richest man in the Austrian Empire, he had unparalleled influence in the Austrian Empire. People at that time often said, Austria has an Emperor Ferdinand and a King Solomon, but today, when his carriage arrived at the door of the Caesar Hotel, he was not greeted by a diligent manager and warm hospitality, and no one even came to borrow money from him. He was greeted by a bullet. The bullet pierced the coachman's head, and blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 29 The Mess, 2. A bullet pierced the driver's head, and the broken glass was covered with a yellow and red liquid. The butler protected him with his body. Follow me, sir. The accompanying guards immediately pulled out their guns and started to fight back. However, the scene was very chaotic, with 4 groups of people shooting at each other. They knew that 2 of them were Prince Mettner's butler and the gendarmerie. At this time, Berg was in the center of the battlefield. He leaned against the overturned carriage and was screaming hysterically. He came to return the box and was suddenly stopped by someone. When the accompanying guards came forward to check the injuries of the people who came, the person who was lying on the ground suddenly jumped up and cut the neck of the guard who came forward with a knife. Go! Someone shouted in Russian. Bang! 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 The gunshots of the people who had been ambushed all around were heard. The people around Berg fell one after another. You have to know that the people around him were all elites selected from the secret police. It is impossible for them to be beaten by ordinary gangsters without any ability to fight back. Has this world gone mad? After the opponent succeeded in one shot, he immediately switched to a revolver for close combat. At that time, rifle guns were all front-loading and had a very slow firing rate, and revolvers also needed to be manually rotated. In short, everyone's firing rate and hit rate were very poor. At this time, another group of people rushed out of the hotel and fired at the people who attacked Berg earlier. The nearby gendarmes heard the gunshots and rushed over, but the captain of the gendarmes was shot through the throat as soon as he put the whistle in his mouth. The captain of the gendarmes covered his neck and spit out blood foam. The gendarmes who lost their command began to shoot randomly. A carriage was driving towards the Caesar Hotel, and the gendarmes immediately shot at it. The coachman was killed, and the people who came down from it also began to shoot randomly. Milosh, who was standing by the window on the 3rd floor, clenched his fists. What the hell is going on? Why are the Russians here? We must not let them ruin our good things. Yes, Grand Duke. Several people standing in the room picked up their guns and rushed downstairs to join the battle. The chaos lasted for a while, and a large number of gendarmes arrived. There were not many attackers left in the chaos just now, and the remaining ones began to flee when they saw the reinforcements of the gendarmerie arrived. There was a burst of gunfire, and most of the attackers were shot dead. The remaining people were also caught up by the gendarmes on horseback and dealt with one by one. In this chaos, 17 people died, 2 gendarmes died, and hundreds of people were injured. Mr. Solomon Rothschild suffered a slight head injury. The Serbian milice and his accomplices were temporarily detained in the Deadwater prison on the outskirts of the city, Met's secretary reported. What a bunch of idiots, tell the gendarmerie to release them immediately. Prepare a carriage for me, I want to go to Mr. Solomon in person. The entire floor outside Solomon Rothschild's ward in the Vienna main hospital was under martial law. Oh, dear Prince Metten. As your loyal friend, I just experienced the biggest gunfight in Vienna since the Napoleonic Wars. Don't mock me, Solomon. What happened today was an accident. Oh. There was a gunfight in front of the Caesar Hotel where I stayed. Has the security in Vienna reached such a point? I wonder if I should change a partner. In order to maintain Austria's influence, Metten had borrowed money from Solomon's bank many times, causing the Austrian Empire, which had long been weak, to fall into a debt quagmire. If he lost Solomon's support now, Metten would not be able to work as prime minister for a day. Mr. Solomon, I know you are very angry. If you have any conditions, you can put forward them. I will try my best to meet them. Facing the little brother who used to please him, Metten now had to act submissive. He felt disgusted but had to do it because the form was stronger than the person. Well, can I make Serbian money as cheap as paper? You want us to occupy Serbia? But that will cause a series of international chain reactions. You know we have an alliance with Russia. I don't care. I'm just a businessman. I just want to make money. For the sake of our friendship for so many years, I tell you that if you want to make money, you can join. If you can't do it, I can find someone else. Solomon's tone was indifferent, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Well, give me some time. I will definitely find a way to do it. Met was sweating profusely. He didn't expect this businessman to be so terrible. His appetite was so big that he could swallow up a country. I'll give you 3 months at most. After 3 months, I'll find a way myself, then I'll take my leave. Mr. Solomon, butler, please see Prince Metten off for me. Don't get ambushed on the road. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. On the way, Metten was worried. The Holy Alliance must exist. Because once the Holy Alliance is dissolved, Austria's weakness will be exposed. And Austria, sandwiched between the Russian iron felt and the French iron hammer, will never have peace. But Solomon's opinion has to be considered. Even if he disagrees, what does it matter? Solomon's money is omnipresent. He can still find other agents. For example, bribe a brainless Ottoman Pasha to start a war. Serbia is a protectorate of Russia, which is an unchangeable fact. And attacking Serbia is of no benefit to Austria, it will only waste money. At that time, he would have to borrow more money from Solomon. These loans were like a quagmire that trapped this shrewd prince. When Prince Metten returned home, Berg came to Prince Metten with the help of 2 injured guards. My lord, I have disappointed you. I will go back home tomorrow, old man, this is not your fault. I expected that there would be 1 or 2 spies in the family, but I didn't expect them to dare to do it in Vienna. Berg choked a little. What do you mean? You have caused so much trouble and want to leave? You can work in my house for the rest of your life. Berg burst into tears and vowed in his heart to be loyal to the Metten family for his whole life, until his death. As a diplomat, Metten still has a lot of personal charm. Metten, who was sober after returning to the study, immediately determined that this matter had nothing to do with the Russians, but was a contradiction among the Serbs. It seems that our prime minister is in trouble, Karimi teased. Actually, it's not that troublesome. Why should we attack Serbia? Why not let the Serbs attack us? Franz spread his hands. Little Franz, you are really a little boss born by a big boss. You are so mean. Karimi thought for a while and added, but, I like it. In Karimi's eyes, Mrs. Sophie was obviously more terrifying. Chapter 30 Big Boss. The big boss in Schönbrunn Palace suddenly sneezed. He was very happy to see the performance chart of his factory rising sharply. The new underwear has formed a dimensionality reduction attack on the old corsets and bras. For those terrible things that will be strangled when they are put on, women of this era have long wanted to discard them. Women in the upper class are like treasures for this new underwear that can liberate themselves. Any sense of shame has long been thrown out of the sky. Madame Sophie's underwear business is getting better and better, but she is not happy. The production of women's underwear requires more than 20 processes. The royal tailors hired by Sophie can complete the piles of orders day and night, and at the same time, these tailors keep asking for higher salaries. In fact, she has raised the salaries of tailors more than once, which is already 3 times their salary a year ago. Even so, these tailors cannot be satisfied, and some even plan to start a new business in private. So Madame Sophie had to come to Franz, which scared Karimi beside her. Karimi hid at the foot of the wall, muttering, "Can't see me, can't see me." Ruskna came forward and moved a tall chair with a backrest to Madame Sophie. "Grand Duchess, please sit down." Madame Sophie looked at Ruskna with approval. She liked this elegant and polite girl. At least she was much better than the gypsy half-blood she picked up and the Jews who bribed her. "Ruskna, you sit down too." He looked at Karimi, who was talking to himself in the corner. "Grand Duke Karimi, why are you here?" The tone was cold, more like a question than a greeting. Karimi's bloodline was very thin, and their family of 5 could only receive the lowest annual pension, 3,000 guilders. Their family did not have a palace, and could only live in a farmhouse outside Vienna. If it were not for Franz's invitation, Karimi would not even be qualified to enter the Schönbrunn Palace. "Isn't it Archduke Franz who is looking for me?" Karimi gave a particularly spineless smile. Madame Sophie was born of noble birth, pure blood, and strong personality. Facing people like Karimi who are not so pure blood, there is a kind of natural pressure from blood. But in Madame Sophie's eyes, this guy must be guilty and must be hiding something from her. Well, he must have done something wrong. He must be borrowing money from Franz. As a mother, I must teach him how to refuse others. That's right, an empire must not have a pleasing personality. Madame Sophie's tone became colder and colder. "Then are you done?" Count Schussel on the side felt numb and instinctively wanted to leave the room. As Madame Sophie's attendant, he knew that Madame Sophie was going to lose her temper. Karimi also felt that something was wrong and looked at Franz. Karimi hesitated. Franz also felt strange. Although his mother was a little cold, she was definitely not an impolite person. Why was she so aggressive today? "I'm asking you a question, Archduke Karimi," Madame Sophie continued to ask. "Mother, I invited Uncle Karimi here. I don't know much about cavalry tactics yet and I have many questions to ask him. You know I have a cavalry regiment in Salzburg. If I want to take over this unit, I must know something about cavalry, don't you agree, Mother?" "Franz, I always think you are a smart child, but don't be too smart." "Ruskna, take Uncle Karimi out first. I have something to talk to Mother about." "Okay, Archduke Franz." Ruskna pinched Karimi's arm hard when she passed by him. Karimi, who was in pain, finally reacted and left with Ruskna with his head down. Count Schussel went out last and closed the door outside. "Franz, is Karimi asking you to borrow money? You are going to be an emperor in the future, so you must not be easily influenced by others. You should have less contact with people like Karimi." Madame Sophie spoke first. "Okay, Mother. I understand." Franz didn't want to refute Madame Sophie and turn the conversation into a tug-of-war. Karimi is a genius in war, but Madame Sophie also means well. Franz's suggestion is to follow other people's paths and leave them with no way to go. Convert the clothing factory, which is not very profitable, into an underwear factory. On the one hand, continue to take the high-end route to tailor high-end underwear for the nobility, and on the other hand, expand production capacity to start producing cheap new underwear to occupy the market. The way to keep a woman from meddling in other people's business is to give her something to do. After Madame Sophie got some feasible suggestions, she decided to leave immediately to busy herself with her own career. Karimi let out a sigh of relief. "Your mother is really..." The door creaked open and Madame Sophie poked her head out. "What a responsible and good mother." Karimi gave a thumbs up and showed a very ugly smile. Madame Sophie ignored Karimi. "Franz, there is also a problem with the perfume formula developed by your Royal Academy of Sciences. The smell is too pungent. You should ask them to come up with a new formula. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. Mother, this is what industrial perfume is like. You can dilute it." "Dilute, just add water." "Got it." Madame Sophie left again. Karimi hesitated for a while. Ruskna closed the door. Karimi sat down on the chair. "Oh my God. She is really a big boss." Karimi, Would like to call her the strongest. Why are you staring at me? Karimi complained. If you were not guilty, how could you be targeted by Madame Sophie? Ruskna mocked. I get scared when I look at her. It's my fault. It's the bloodline that suppresses it. It's just the law of nature. Ahem. Stop arguing. Uncle Karimi, let's get down to business. I'll get straight to the point. How long will it take you and how many people will it take to occupy Belgrade? Karimi is a general who is good at attacking and has a very calm mind. After all, he is a talent recommended by Archduke Karl, and he was instilled with a lot of modern tactics and ancient Chinese military tactics by Franz. It's hard to say. Belgrade is located at the confluence of the Sava River and the Danube River. The city is strong and deep, easy to defend and difficult to attack. It is worthy of its reputation as the key to the Balkans. And if your intelligence is accurate, then the defensive force that Belgrade can mobilize is far beyond our estimation. In this case, the siege may last any length of time. What if the main force of the Serbs can fight you head-on? Karimi smiled, as if he was waiting for this. If we let the Serbs attack Nordsavia as you said, it would be in vain no matter how many people they send with Serbian weapons and equipment. Theoretically, if the garrison is out and there is an insider to open the city gate, I only need a 3,000-man cavalry unit to take Belgrade. Chapter 31 Good stuff. I will take Belgrade with 3,000 men to continue Prince Eugen's great cause, Karimi said with great ambition. Franz clapped his hands and laughed. Uncle Karimi has great ambitions. I really hope you can surpass Prince Eugen. There are too few people in the family who can lead troops, and the generals in the army are too old. It's a bit too contemptuous of the Serbs to want to take Belgrade with only 3,000 people. You said that their main force will attack Nordsavia. I just need to avoid their main force. A raid only requires a regiment of cavalry to enter the city. Belgrade can be suppressed in half a day. At this time, the total population of Belgrade was less than 80,000, and the gendarmerie in the city did not exceed 3,000 people. They only had simple weapons, which would not work if they faced elite cavalry. But there might be street fighting, so it was not very favorable for cavalry. Fortunately, Austria had a large number of dragoons. The name of dragoon sounds very intimidating. But in fact, it is a very embarrassing type of soldier, a mounted infantry or a very mobile infantry. For the East, it is a bit like Takeda Shingen's cavalry. Riding horses is just for running fast, not for fighting on horseback. It's just that our people are not familiar with Serbia, and the local Serbian guides may not really help us. Have you sent people in Serbia a long time ago? You little brat, how can you have so much power? Of course not. I have something good to show you. What's so mysterious? Is it a new weapon? The kind that can blow up the city gate in one go? Franz did not answer, and the three entered a secret room. In the basement, a woman was hanging, with a well-proportioned outline, a beautiful face under a beautiful blonde hair, but there was a bruise on her face. Tisk tisk. I didn't expect you to like this. You have taste, but it is not advisable to treat women violently. Why is there a wound on your face? And Franz, you are only a few years old. You won't grow up if you do this. Karimi was talking to himself, looking at Franz and then at Ruskna, and then smiled with ill intentions. Can I splash water on him? Ruskna asked. Yes, Franz replied. You are so bad. Don't you know how to be gentle with women? How can you treat a beautiful woman like this? Karimi taunted. A bucket was directly placed on Karimi's head. So you want to splash me? Who told you to talk nonsense? You are tarnishing Franz's reputation. Ruskna was very angry, but she did not forget to borrow Franz's name when she reprimanded Karimi. After all, the other party is a royal family. If she wants to teach him a lesson, she can only use the power of the tiger to bully him. Uncle Karimi, when can you change your bad habits? This is a Russian spy named Yelidonia Tikhon. Yelidonia was born in the East Siberian city of Bratsk. Her father was a local nobleman, and later his family was killed because of a peasant uprising. After the uprising, the family property was seized by local officials, and Yelidonia was sent to an orphanage. She was selected by Count in the orphanage and trained in St. Petersburg. She was employed by the Russian Empire's Special Third Department and was good at assassination and intelligence gathering. She once joined the Free Serbian group organized by the Karađorđe family at the instruction of the organization and had been lurking in the Principality of Serbia for 3 years. She participated in many assassinations of anti-Russian members of Serbia and forged many property and power transfer documents. Then how did you catch her? This place is nearly 500 kilometers away from Serbia, Oh, she came to the door herself. The woman who was hanging in the air moved her throat. A month ago, she was trapped in the city of Pančevo. But fortunately, the drunkard she caught was actually an Ottoman nobleman who had a pass issued by the Ottoman Empire. Although the Principality of Serbia was actually independent, it was still a vassal state of the Ottoman Empire in name. This pass from the Ottoman Empire was also valid in Serbia. Yelidonia quickly left Pančevo with her own intelligence. It's just that the so-called motherland Russia, she never wanted to go back. Let alone the impact of the failure of this mission, her old superior who looked at her with a lecherous look on his face was unbearable. Where should she go back? She thought of many places, such as the Ottoman Empire, France, Britain, and even the beacon country on the other side of the ocean. However, the Ottoman Empire was already corrupt, and the Russians naturally hated this pseudo-Roman Empire, so it was ruled out first. France was the center of progress on the European continent at this time, but the political situation in France at this time was turbulent, and the French were also very xenophobic, especially against the Russians. Maybe she could pretend to be a Pole, but at most she would be reduced to the fate of a mistress of a nobleman. Britain was the most powerful country in the world at this time, but her English was not good, and what she learned was difficult to use in Britain. And I heard that British capitalists were more cruel than Russian slave owners. The American dream was beautiful, but it was a pity that it was an illusory thing that was difficult to capture. She was a realistic woman, because she had experienced too much, and the kind of dream that deceived children was difficult to seduce her. She knew what she wanted not to be bullied, and wanted to be respected. She also wanted to live like an aristocrat. In Vienna, she had her idol, Madame Sophie, in this era when men controlled the world. As a woman, she is known for her strength, and she never yields to men or secular rules. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. Especially the underwear she designed, it is so free. Since I have it, I no longer have to worry about breaking my ribs when I put on clothes. Yelidonia wants to meet her idol. Maybe her talent can be displayed in Vienna. Madame Sophie will definitely understand her and will definitely use her. She came to Vienna, but it was too difficult to enter the palace to see Madame Sophie. If she stopped the carriage on the road, what if the driver did not brake? Wouldn't it be too unfair for her? But as smart as she was, she soon found a breakthrough. She was introduced to a little girl, who was said to be a maid beside the crown prince. This little girl didn't look very smart, and she quickly gained her trust. Yelidonia cried about her experience, which was unfortunate, half true and half false. Bitterness is not only effective for men, but also for women. Yelidonia got the opportunity to enter the palace. Yelidonia had a French braid on her shoulder. She had a clean face and great features. Under her high nose bridge was a cherry mouth. Her lips were slightly upturned, as if there was a kind of magic that fascinated people. She was wearing a simple and clean linen dress, and she was pure and charming. She felt that she was very good, and no man could escape from her palm. As long as she entered the palace, she would definitely become the mistress of a big man, and maybe even the health worker of the crown prince. This was a privilege for an ordinary woman. Just following this stupid girl into the palace, she found that the security inside was much stronger than it looked outside. Her clothes were searched several times, and she was pulled into the room by several old maids and searched carefully. Then waiting for her were a lot of seemingly simple and unrelated problems, but a slight mistake would trigger a chain reaction and then be discovered. She still passed the level, and the silly girl wanted to take her to report to the court lady. But when she passed by the crown prince's study, she sneaked in for some reason. The crown prince was a teenager, looking for information in front of a large map. She wanted to hug the boy in front of her for some reason. But she regretted it the next second. The boy's body suddenly sank and avoided her arms. At the same time, he grabbed her left wrist and threw her out. When she was lying on the ground and didn't understand what was going on, she felt a sharp pain in her arm. One of her arms was dislocated, and she wanted to stand up and escape in panic. But Franz didn't let her go. He grabbed her only remaining right wrist, turned her body, and pressed the power of his body on her shoulders. With a force, Yelidonia's other arm was also removed. Then her chin was hit and she lost consciousness. Later, when she woke up, her arms had been connected, but now they were hanging in the air. In the dim candlelight, the silly girl who was deceived by her was talking and laughing with a boy. It seemed as if he was laughing at himself. Ms. Spy, honest people are more professional at deceiving people than you, a spy. Franz sat on a chair, leaning his head on his arm, looking at the strange ant who was about to attack him with interest. Chapter 32 Interrogation. 10 days ago, in the underground secret room of the small conference room in Schönbrunn Palace. How could I be a spy, Archduke Franz? You misunderstood. I don't know anything, I just want to say hello to you. Yeladonia instinctively defended as a spy. Being arrested as a spy is a principle. You must say you don't know even if you are beaten to death. Otherwise, even if you are telling false information, it is also encouraging the other party, at least proving that the other party has caught the right person. Even if your information is proven to be false, it means that you are almost unable to bear it, and you must be used as a breakthrough point. All kinds of charges and torture instruments will come up, and they are not afraid that you will not admit it. If your information is not confirmed, it also means that you know your identity, and there is still information to be dug. Don't leave, stay. Give you a token of allegiance, so that you are neither inside nor outside, and have to cooperate. Although Yeladonia acted very calmly, her analysis was very accurate, and her approach was impeccable. She had not recovered from the shock of being beaten by Franz before, and she made a mistake as soon as she opened her mouth. How do you know that I'm Franz and not Maximilian or Ludwig? Yeladonia wanted to say that she heard it from someone, but she had just entered the palace and had hardly talked to anyone, which meant that it was very easy for Franz to verify the truth of her words. I can see at first glance that you are different. Yeladonia could only come up with a sentence. After all, the person she was disguising herself as was a Serbian from Vojvodina who came to Vienna to find a job. And were you attracted by my kingly aura? Franz said without changing his expression, and Maya on the side looked at Franz with disdain. Yes, that's it. You're lying. Maya couldn't help it first. Look, my maids all know you're lying. Let me tell you, Maya often goes out to meet people like you. The tricks you usually use are similar, and you think this guy is easy to fool. In addition, the guards outside the palace don't seem to be very strict, so you think it's easy to sneak into the palace, but when you enter the palace, you will find that the truth is far from what you think, but you will never have the chance to go out again. But then again, you are the first one to come to me. It doesn't matter how you deceive those guards and inquisitors, you just need to tell me your identity and the purpose of your trip. I will give you a sum of money and send you to Venice. You can go anywhere you want at that time, okay, Miss Spy? Tell us your identity and the purpose of your trip, and we can all feel relieved. Yeladonia was still hesitating. She originally came to Austria for refuge, but now she was caught and felt very embarrassed, especially being caught and threatened by a little kid. Wouldn't it make her look incompetent? At this time, the stupid girl named Maya brought a strange pot with vegetables and condiments on the side. She opened a vent, and then began to add water to the pot, and put charcoal underneath. What is this for? Is she going to torture herself with such a small pot? Yeladonia thought so, but the pot was too small and the water was too little. It was just enough to burn her feet. Since you won't talk, Spy, let me tell you about this pot. Do you know? In the East, there is a way of eating a donkey alive. Franz slowly took out a book and pulled out a bookmark. Franz opened the book and turned to Yeladonia. Yeladonia stared at the illustration on the book with wide eyes. A donkey was tied up tightly, and a pot of boiling soup was boiling next to it. The person next to him was holding a sharp knife, pretending to cut the flesh. Let me explain. If the diners want to eat that part of the meat, they can cut the skin and flesh with a sharp knife, and then pour the old soup several times until the meat is cooked. Then cut the meat off, or grill it, or hot pot it alive. I personally prefer hot pot. What about you, Miss Spy? Yeladonia couldn't answer. Was she going to eat me like a donkey? She was shocked. It is said that when eating, you should listen to the donkey's screams while eating to achieve the true state of color, fragrance, taste and sound. Maya took out a small bundle and opened it. There were chef knives, boning knives, skinning knives, bone-cutting knives, and fillet knives. Franz picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of fresh meat and put it in the pot. After a while, the piece of fresh meat turned from fresh red to cooked gray. Well, the pot is already boiling. Then Miss Spy, there are 300 grams of lamb in this plate. I hope to hear your answer before I finish it. Franz dipped the piece of meat in the sauce and put it in his mouth. Chewing quietly. Maya pulled the capstan beside her, and this time Yeladonia's body was pulled into a big letter shape, unable to struggle anymore. The meat on Franz's plate was almost gone, and Maya picked up a skinning knife and walked towards Yeladonia. Yeladonia swallowed her saliva and raised her head. I'm here to surrender. The latest novels are first published on Liuji Ujishuba. Oh, there are 3 more pieces. I'll say it again, your identity and the purpose of your trip. Maya took out a piece of cloth, dipped it in a little alcohol, and wiped Yeladonia's calves that looked like white lotus roots. My name is Yeladonia. I was born in the East Siberian city of Bratsk. She is employed by the Russian Empire's Special Third Department and is good at assassination and intelligence gathering. She is a member of the 5th group of the West Russian Plan. She joined the Free Serbian group organized by the Karađorđe family at the instruction of the organization and has been lurking in Serbia for 3 years. The purpose of this trip is to surrender and join the Austrian Empire. I have a list of Serbian pro-Russian factions, and I also know the content of the entire West Russian plan. I can work for the Austrian Empire and I am willing to join Austria, Yeladonia said a lot in one breath, especially emphasizing that she is still useful. Maya breathed a sigh of relief, although Franz said that he just used the knife to scare the woman. But think about cutting a person's skin and then pouring boiling water and old soup into it. This is simply too scary. Franz even said that he would cut off the meat and eat it with sauce. Franz didn't expect that she was really a spy of the Russian Empire. Although it can be seen from some characteristics that she is Russian, and the intelligence sent by the secret police also said that she came from the East. What is the West Russian plan? I have heard of the East Russian plan, a cruel and evil plan, in history. What happened to the Russian spy chief in Serbia who suddenly came to Austria? What happened to her or what happened to them that forced them to change sides? I think you must have something to tell me. Miss Yeladonia, do you drink? Chapter 33 West Russia Plan, 1. There is no impenetrable wall in the world, but sometimes what is spread is evil wind. For example, the death of Count Andrew, the Hungarian ambassador, was deliberately distorted after it reached Hungary. The brave and upright Count Andrew was entrusted by the Hungarian government to serve as an envoy to the Austrian royal family. Faced with the harsh conditions and unreasonable demands put forward by the Austrian royal family, he argued with reason and fought with the heroes. In the end, the Austrians lost face and defeated Napoleon and the Pope. By the way, at this time, Napoleon still had unparalleled influence and was often used to scare people. The emperor was angry and had no choice, but the most cunning and treacherous prime minister in the world came up with a poisonous plan. That is to bribe Count Andrew's entourage and poison Count Andrew's celebratory wine. Count Andrew drank the poisoned wine without any defense. The shameful traitor was finally exposed under the majesty of Count Andrew. Count Andrew summoned up his divine power and killed the rebellious followers. Even after his death, his majestic body still remained. So when Franz mentioned the wine, Yeladonia's heart trembled violently. Her voice was crying and almost turned into a plea. Archduke Franz, I really came to Austria for refuge. I am sincere and I am still useful. There is a list of the Karađorđe family's supporters in Vojvodina province in the interlayer of my shoes. Just arrest people according to the addresses on it to prove that what I said is true. I also know a lot of information. Franz just wanted to welcome this Russian spy who came to surrender based on the traditional thinking that you have a story and I have wine, but he didn't expect the other party to react so strongly. Anyway, accept her information first, and as for her, let's leave her alone for 2 days. Maya, take good care of Miss Yeladonia, but don't let her go. Franz was about to go out and thought, if you feel that you can't take good care of her, call Ruskna. Maya was not very good at taking care of people, and as a result, Yeladonia was tortured for a few days. Her hair was messy and her tongue was bitten. Later, Maya also found her own problem and called Ruskna. Ruskna was much better than Maya in taking care of people. At least she would not put hot soup directly into people's mouths, nor would she use the tablecloth to wipe people's faces. But this girl's eyes were always cold, and she would occasionally recite poems to herself, not to mention how weird it was in such a dark dungeon. In this way, this shrewd Russian female spy was tortured for several days. She has confessed everything she knows, and she only hopes that this kind of life can end soon. Today Franz finally brought people here. Why is the person next to Archduke Franz so ugly? But he should be a royal family. The elder has a face like the one in the portrait. That super exaggerated big chin, compact facial features, and a bald head, just like Carlos II. Let me introduce you, this is my uncle, Grand Duke Karimi, Lieutenant General of the Imperial Army. Franz pointed at Karimi. Uncle Karimi, this is Miss Yeladonia. Raskana, let Miss Yeladonia down. The capstan slowly turned, and Yeladonia's handcuffs were finally opened. She rubbed her wrists. Because she behaved well, she would be let down when someone was guarding her. But today Raskina had to help Franz deal with affairs, and Maya was not around. So she was hung up. My beautiful lady, I heard that you also attacked this guy. You have to know that although he is a child, he is the best fighter I have ever seen. If he was born a few hundred years earlier, he would definitely be a monster on the battlefield, Kirimi teased. Yeladonia still remembered the experience of that day and nodded. Yes, Grand Duke Kirimi. Grand Duke Franz's close combat ability is really terrible, okay, Miss Yeladonia. I hope you can help us. After this matter is done, you will get the status of an Italian noble and a fortune that is enough for you to use. Then we will send you to Venice. You are free to go or stay, Grand Duke Franz, please don't question my loyalty. I came to Austria sincerely. I can swear, Yeladonia said so. Franz was deeply skeptical of the oath of a spy. But he still said it. Of course I believe you, Miss Yeladonia. But as a former employee of the 3rd Department of the Russian Empire, aren't you afraid of assassination and retaliation once your identity is exposed? I am also considering your safety. After this is over, you must leave Serbia. In fact, what Franz really cares about is the relationship with Russia. It is common for intelligence personnel to betray and expose each other, but it is difficult to deal with once the relationship between the two countries is involved. If necessary, it is not a bad idea to make this woman disappear completely from this world. After all, Austria will need Russia as an ally in the next few decades. In history, the Austrian Empire's meaningless betrayal in the Crimean War was equivalent to digging a grave for itself. Everything is at your command, Archduke Franz. The reason why Yeladonia's attitude changed so quickly was that from the moment she admitted that she was a Russian spy, there was no way back. Now all she had to do was to prove her worth and not be treated as a useless pawn. She took out a defense map, which marked the garrison area and force composition of the Serbian army, as well as the possible offensive routes of the Austrian Empire and what measures Serbia should take to defend. The latest novel is first published on the 6th 9-book bar. This defense map was specially tailored for the Western Russian Plan by the 3rd Special Section. Once the Western Russian Plan is implemented, Western countries including Austria, Britain, and France will inevitably react. This defense map was specially designed for possible actions that the Austrian Empire might take against the Serbian region. First, spies from the Special Section 3 would collect intelligence, and then send it to St. Petersburg for special generals to deduce and formulate defense strategies. Once the Austrian Empire takes action, this defense map will appear in the Serbian military headquarters. As long as the Serbs follow the instructions on the map, they will have no problem defending for a few months, not to mention defeating Austria. Kirimi picked up the defense map and looked at it for a while. He couldn't help but sneer, and it got louder and louder. This kind of laughter made Yeladonia look very ugly. Archduke Kirimi, is there anything funny? Kirimi sat down with the defense map while patting his thigh. Haha, who formulated the defense strategy on this map? He's such a genius. If Franz shows this to Uncle Karl, Archduke Karl, he'll laugh to death too. Chapter 34 A Small Request. Next week, this book will be strongly recommended at the conference. I hope you can give more comments and votes. In addition, if you have time, you can invest by reading the book for 10 minutes. Please help me. Thank you. I will try my best to keep updating twice a day. The plot needs a small transition, foreshadowing, before it can get on track, the main line of the world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 West Russia Plan, 2. Franz took the defense map from Kirimi and looked at it carefully. The directions that the Austrian army might attack were marked on it, and the focus of defense was on fortresses that were easy to defend but difficult to attack. And it was planned to destroy all important roads and bridges in Serbia, so that the people would hide in the mountains and not leave a grain of food for the Austrians. Isn't this a scorched earth policy? If the Serbs really did this during the war, the Austrian army would not be able to fight to support the war. The difficult-to-conquer fortresses and the guerrillas roaming around would greatly consume the combat effectiveness of the Austrian army. Franz frowned and felt that Serbia, with its complex terrain, was indeed difficult to deal with. If the war was really fought like this, it would be a terrible war of attrition. However, this time the operation was only to capture Belgrade and help Miloš eliminate those pro-Russian factions. Austria only attacked the city and forced the 17-member parliament to sign an armistice agreement. As for being a butcher, let Miloš do it himself. Even Franz, an outsider, could see that Serbia was a tough nut to crack. Napoleon was defeated by Russia's scorched earth policy. The Russians certainly wanted to replicate the miracle of the year in Serbia. But why was Karimi laughing? Franz? Isn't it funny that the Russians want to implement a scorched earth policy in Serbia? Karimi laughed without grace, almost like a pig, and his tears were about to come out. But those who are familiar with the Napoleonic Wars know that the Russians relied on the scorched earth policy to defeat the invincible Napoleon's army. Even now, the Austrian Empire is not as good as the Napoleonic Empire at that time. France, Russia and Yeladonia looked at each other, and everyone thought that the scorched earth policy was really difficult to eliminate its influence easily. Although it is a double-edged sword, it is obviously the stronger party that is more hurt. France, it seems that you are not very smart. Look at these idiots who drew the mountains of Serbia so big, and the fortresses are all big red circles. The annotation also said that they would destroy all the bridges and roads in Serbia. How deceptive. But didn't you notice that there is such a big Danube river running through Serbia? With a Danube, it is really useless to implement a scorched earth policy. With a Danube's transportation capacity, even if they send hundreds of thousands of troops, there will be no problem with supplies. Then the Serbs gave up the main cities and plains and hid in the mountains. They wanted to shut the door and beat the dog for the Austrians. With a Danube to transport supplies, this operation is simply seeking death. Franz couldn't help but exclaim sincerely, "It's really great." What Franz didn't say was that this would save Austria a lot of trouble. No, it was a huge help. No wonder Karimi laughed like a pig. Uncle Karimi, you are a genius. You saw through the loopholes in this defense map at a glance, Franz complimented. Then Uncle Karimi, let's listen to the Tsar's plan for Western Russia. The Russian Tsar is the master of all Europe, and no country can stand in Russia's way. These are the original words of Tsar Nicholas I, arrogant but also very domineering. The Tsar will use all means to seize the Ottoman Empire's legacy in the Near East, recover Constantinople and complete the unfinished dream of the Third Roman Empire. And the influence of Western countries including the Austrian Empire, the French Empire, and the British Empire will be completely excluded from the Balkans. However, the ultimate goal of the Western Russian plan is to establish a Slavic empire from the Elbe River to the east, from the Adriatic Sea to the Arctic Ocean. According to the estimation of Tsarist Russia, the only countries that may directly compete with Russia in the Balkans and have a head-on conflict in the future are Austria and the Ottoman Empire, but the armies of Austria and the Ottoman Empire are both in a state of disrepair, and there is almost no decent navy. Then the best way to stop Austria from marching into the Balkans was to drive a nail into Austria. It was impossible for him to swallow it or pull it out. As for the Ottoman Empire, it was just meat on the chopping board of the Tsarist Russia, and it could be cut at any time. In theory, Britain and France would not send a large army to intervene, and at most they would only send the navy to demonstrate, and the scale of the war would be small. At this time, the two principalities of Moldova and Wallachia had become the protectorates of the Tsarist Russia, and in fact they had already implemented military occupation, political control and plunder. If Austria attacked Serbia, Russia could mobilize troops within a month to march straight into Serbia to fight. The last step of the Western Russian plan was to reach an agreement with the British in order to realize the ambition of recovering Constantinople, the capital of the Third Roman Empire. The Tsar was willing to sacrifice some interests in exchange for the consent of the British. This even included giving the Asian part of the Ottoman Empire to the British. Even if Britain did not agree to go to war, it didn't matter. In 1833, Russia's military aid to the Ottoman Empire actually turned the Black Sea into a Russian inland lake. In the secret clauses of the Russian-Turkish Alliance Treaty, the Ottoman Empire acknowledged that the Black Sea Straits were open to Russian warships, and for the sake of Russian interests, the Dardanelles Strait was blocked, prohibiting any other country's fleet from entering the Black Sea Straits at any time and under any pretext. The Black Sea also has a solid Sevastopol fortress as a naval port shelter. The Russians firmly believed that even if their maritime forces could not defeat the British, they would always have no problem protecting themselves. History has proved that the wishful thinking of the Tsarist Russian ambitions was wrong. The British had no intention of negotiating at all, and France did not adopt a neutral policy. Nicholas I's dream of a great power was shattered. In an environment of internal and external difficulties, he died of poison. At this time, the Russians did not know their fate. In order to accelerate the realization of the Western Russian plan, at the instruction of the Tsar, experts in St. Petersburg and Moscow cooperated with a special third department to compile a pamphlet and spread it everywhere. They advocated the establishment of a pan-Slavic alliance to confront Europe. Russia brainwashed the people in the Balkans under the banner of liberating various Slavic brothers and protecting Orthodox Christians from persecution. There are 6 core contents in this booklet. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. First, all Slavs must be liberated and the areas where they live should be merged with Russia. Second, this alliance must include Constantinople, together with the Sea of Marmara, the Bosporus and the Adriatic Sea. Third, Constantinople will be the third capital of the alliance. Fourth, the Pan-Slavic alliance must be loyal to the Tsar, who is the leader of the alliance, and the other kingdoms will be ruled by the monarchs selected by the Tsar. Fifth, the alliance will include 8 kingdoms: Tsarist Russia, the Kingdom of Bohemia, Moravia, Slovakia, the Kingdom of Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, the Kingdom of Bulgaria, the Kingdom of Romania, the Kingdom of Hungary, the Kingdom of Greece, and the Kingdom of Constantinople. Sixth, Poland, Albania, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus and Ukraine should be directly subordinate to Russia. Karimi didn't know how ambitious the Russian Empire was, and he couldn't help but frown. Franz, I've heard of people wanting to eat elephant trunks, but I've never heard of people wanting to eat an elephant in one bite. Are the Russians really not afraid of being stuffed to death? Uncle Karimi, let me correct you. They won't be stuffed to death, because they'll choke to death before they can swallow. Chapter 36 West Russia Plan, 3. Is this all about the Western Russian plan? Karimi asked. Yeladonia answered. That's all I know. How confident do you think you are of success? Karimi continued to ask. Uncle Karimi, that's very rude. That's right. We are one family now. I want to know how likely you think they are to win. Karimi patted Yeladonia's shoulder in a familiar manner. Yeladonia withdrew without a word. I don't know, but I think it's nothing in your eyes. Oh, why? His Majesty the Tsar's ambition really scares me, Karimi teased. But I can't see a trace of shock or anger in Archduke Franz's eyes, as if he had known it for a long time, and he was calm without a ripple. You know, His Majesty the Tsar's grand ambitions have moved those pretentious princes and local leaders to tears and incoherent speech, or shocked them so much that they couldn't speak for a long time. Karimi is a pure soldier, and he only thinks about fighting. He had no interest in anything else. In his eyes, there were only those who could fight and those who could not. Now there were more who could fight and those who could not fight, which was a great improvement. Franz would not be shocked. After all, Nicholas I had more evil plans in the east. Speaking of which, the death expedition in Central Asia seemed to have begun. The expeditionary force of tens of thousands of people was completely lost in the desert of the Khanate of Kokand, and only a few hundred people escaped back to Russia. Thank you for your compliment, Miss Yeladonia. I hope you can cooperate with us. Cheers to a better tomorrow. Miss Yeladonia, you don't like to drink, so I asked Ruskna to make coffee. Ruskna handed the coffee on the tray to Franz, Karimi and Yeladonia in turn. Yeladonia watched Franz carefully as he used the delicate long spoon to scoop out a spoonful of white sugar and poured it into the steaming black coffee. Black coffee because there was no instant coffee in this era. The eating habits in Vienna are very bad, that is, they like to add sugar to everything, but as the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. After a long time, Franz thought it was not bad. As an authentic Viennese, Karimi threw sugar cubes into the cup. In the end, he almost let the coffee overflow from the cup before he stopped. At this time, he had added 7 sugar cubes. On the other side, Ruskna was even more exaggerated. As a woman living in Vienna, how could she not know how to make Viennese coffee? She poured melted chocolate and cream into the coffee cup, and its sweetness had reached a lethal dose. This is simply a representative of the diabetic diet. Ruskna kindly handed the cup of coffee, whose sweetness was already visible, to Yeladonia. Yeladonia took the saucer of coffee and calculated how much exercise she had to do today to metabolize this cup of coffee. After drinking the coffee, Karimi's expression was a little strange. Ruskna, take Miss Yeladonia to her room to rest first. Karimi scratched his head. Franz, Didn't you say that the alliance with Russia is the best choice for Austria? But how can they be allies with such great ambitions? I feel that they are much worse than the Hungarians. In Karimi's mind, Russia is as bad as the Ottoman Empire. Politics and war are not the same thing. There are many such petty things in politics. False appeasement and suspicion are the norm. So what if you are trying to get the skin of a tiger? I am really not suitable for politics. Visible enemies are easier to deal with. The victory between great powers can basically be divided into three types: process victory, result victory, and order victory. Isn't the result victory enough? Not enough. The victor defeats the powerful enemy and forces the other side to surrender, reaping the fruits of victory in a short period of peace, but cannot change the international order, making the fruits of victory extremely fragile. Franz continued. This is what happened to Carthage and Rome in history. The Romans won the First Punic War. Carthage was forced to seek peace, ceding Sicily and the nearby Lipari Islands to Rome and paying an indemnity of 3,200 talents, to be paid off within 10 years. Rome then established its first province in Sicily. In 238 BC, Rome took advantage of the riot of Carthaginian mercenaries to send troops to occupy Sardinia and Corsica, and in 227 BC, the two islands became a province. However, this fragile balance only lasted for 20 years. When Carthage became strong again, the peace treaty became a dead letter. I think Uncle Karimi must have heard the story of Hannibal crossing the Alps and raiding Italy. This kind of victory without establishing a post-war order can only be wishful thinking after all. I think I prefer victory in the process, Uncle Karimi. Victory in the process will certainly bring great honor and reputation to the victor himself. But it is meaningless to the country, the people and the whole world. The latest novel is first published on Liujiu 9 Shishuba. The Napoleonic Wars belong to this kind of process victory. As a great hero, Napoleon won dazzling victory after dazzling victory in the war. But the result was anti-French alliance again and again, and the strength of the anti-French alliance became stronger and stronger. Eventually, Austria, Prussia, Russia and Britain overseas were forced to unite to fight against France. The result of the Napoleonic Wars was that France lost its position as the hegemon of Europe and completely lost the strength to compete with Britain globally. Napoleon himself died of depression on the island of Saint Henri. Then what is the victory of order? Since Karimi asked sincerely, I will tell him mercifully. The Vienna system formulated by our Prime Minister, Lord Metten, is a typical victory of order. Is our Prime Minister so powerful? Then why are people from the public to politicians and the royal family scolding him? Ahem. After all, his system has existed for a long time and it will definitely affect the interests of some people, but I have to say that our Prime Minister is indeed a genius. On the one hand, the Vienna final solution, by retaining a relatively strong France, formed the basis for Austria to dominate the German Confederation. During the Napoleonic Wars, the German countries fully realized that between the French hammer and the Russian iron felt, it was impossible for the German countries to dominate their own destiny. Prussia was also unable to protect itself. Only by uniting with Austria could they get out of this predicament. A strong France also forced Prussia and Russia to maintain an alliance with Austria to prevent France from making a comeback. On the other hand, through the political principle of divine right of kings, the three emperors' alliance of Prussia, Austria and Russia was ensured, and at the same time, the emergence of the second blasphemous alliance after Russia and France got closer to each other was prevented. Russia's support was also obtained to prevent challenges from Prussia. Uncle Karimi, has there ever been a large-scale war in Europe under the Vienna system? The current peace shows that our Prime Minister's strategy is successful. A stable international order can greatly reduce the energy and fighting spirit of the rebels, but aren't we going to war now? Karimi complained. That's why we have to try to reduce the impact of this war, reduce the scale of the war, and try not to irritate Russia's sensitive nerves. Peaceful development is beneficial to the current Austrian Empire. Chapter 37 Curiosity kills the cat. Two flowers bloom, each with its own beauty. Yelidonia followed Ruskna and finally left the dungeon where she had been imprisoned for many days. At least she thought it was a dungeon, but it had all kinds of beds and furniture, even red wine and coffee-making tools. The passages inside were also interconnected. For example, the place they came out this time seemed to be a warehouse. Yelidonia's adventurer's soul was burning. The palace was so big, she wanted to take a look. When she turned a corner, Yelidonia took advantage of Ruskna's inattention. Slipped into a room with a half-open door. Yelidonia closed the door gently and breathed a sigh of relief. If she were to choose again, she would never come to Vienna. It is rumored that the Habsburg family members are not very smart. How come one or two of them are so difficult to deal with, and they were caught by a child? Fortunately, Archduke Franz did not kill himself with a knife, or hand himself over to the guards. If he was really handed over to the guards, it would be better to kill himself with a knife. The interrogation efficiency of this era was very low, but it was extremely barbaric. A bloody smell came into Yeladonia's nose from behind, which immediately made her nervous. She turned around and looked behind her. A middle-aged man with a big belly, a white apron stained with blood tied around his waist, holding a boning knife in his hand. "Ah, beautiful lady, what makes us meet here? Is this the arrangement of fate? I am so lucky." Palinka shook his greasy hair, picked up a broccoli and held it in his mouth, then used the oil on his hand to stroke his hair again. His little eyes blinked, and I don't know if there was something dirty in his eyes, or if he was flirting with Yeladonia. A chill went from Yeladonia's coccyx to the top of her head, and she couldn't help shivering. What does this man in front of her do? Is this an interrogation room? The blood-stained apron, the boning knife, and the stakes hanging around. Could it be? Yeladonia looked and thought, and couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions in her chest. Seeing that the woman in front of him did not react, Palinka remembered the winning moves that the crown prince had taught him. Palinka quickly stepped forward and stretched out a palm. With a slap sound, he slapped the door, stopping Yeladonia from escaping. Palinka stretched his neck and stared at Yeladonia seriously and closely. As if he wanted to see through her, Palinka took a deep breath and mustered up his courage. "Beautiful lady, can you spend the night with me tonight?" However, the frightened Yeladonia could not hear at all, nor did she want to hear. She kicked Palinka in the crotch and then ran out of the door. "Ruskna, Miss Ruskna! Save me!" Yeladonia shouted and chased in the direction where Ruskna had just gone. She opened a door, and the sunlight was a little dazzling to her. The air was fresh, and there were maids, low-level maids, washing clothes all around. The maids around were looking at her as if she were a monster. Just as she was wondering, the door behind her closed and locked. A tall middle-aged woman walked towards Yeladonia with a serious expression, and a big mole on her cheek made her look even more fierce. "You newcomer, how can you be so ignorant of the rules? Do you want to be lazy?" The tall middle-aged woman twisted Yeladonia's ear and pulled her aside. "Who is in charge of you? You are so unruly and you haven't even tied your hair. Are you trying to seduce someone? Don't think you can climb over me just because you look good, you lowly person." After all, Yeladonia had practiced self-defense, and she grabbed the middle-aged woman in front of her and made her scream in pain. Yeladonia, who thought she had succeeded in the counterattack, didn't have time to be happy. There's a rebellion. This new woman knows witchcraft," the middle-aged woman shouted immediately. Before Yeladonia could react, she was pressed to the side of the well by a group of middle-aged women. "Tell me, which one is in charge of you?" Yeladonia was wearing a maid's clothes, so naturally no one would take her seriously. "I'm new here, Miss Ruskna brought me here." "Ruskna? Everyone knows that vampire only comes out at night, and you dare to lie to me? Let me teach you the rules. Sisters, hold this little hoof for me, okay, Mrs. Hunk." Yeladonia's limbs were held down, and suddenly she felt a sharp pain in her thighs. Just as she was about to scream, someone blocked her mouth with a rag. The steel needles penetrated her clothes and went in and out of her body on her thighs, buttocks, back, and armpits. She twisted her body in pain, but her brain was very clear. "I really regretted that I shouldn't have run around. If I had honestly followed Ruskna, I could at least have been a guest of honor for a few days. Now, I was treated as a laundry woman and had to be abused by this group of middle-aged women. Ah, it hurts. Fortunately, I have received training in this area before." What am I celebrating? I am so unlucky. How can I escape?" Yeladonia thought to herself, and suddenly her eyes went dark, and a familiar pretty figure appeared in front of her. But Ruskna's face was as cold as ice, and Zunk Momo stopped his hand movements. "Vampire," a blunt Momo said casually. Zunk Momo slapped the unlucky guy hard. "How dare you be rude to Miss Ruskna?" His eyes were fierce, but he was actually signaling her to apologize quickly. I'm sorry, Miss Ruskna, I didn't mean it. I apologize to you. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Let her go, Miss Ruskna, she broke the rules. We are teaching her a lesson. I say again, I want to take her away. Madame Sophie wants to see her." Hearing Madame Sophie, Zonk Momo was so scared that the steel needle in her hand fell to the ground. In this palace, nothing is more terrible than offending Madame Sophie. Even Queen Anna's maid could not escape the fate of disappearing from the world. The surrounding Momo immediately let go of Yeladonia. As soon as Yeladonia stood up, she saw Ruskna picking up the steel needle on the ground. Ruskna pressed the steel needle on the shoulder of the Momo who called her a vampire before, and pressed hard. Yeladonia frowned. Although she was stabbed so hard just now, she was definitely not as cruel as Ruskna, who actually pushed the whole needle in. The Momo immediately fell to the ground and wailed, but no one around dared to help her. If I find out about this again, I'll push the steel needle out of your head. Ruskna left with Yeladonia in the eyes of everyone's doubts. I didn't expect you to be so cruel. Yeladonia saw that Ruskna looked unhappy and immediately changed the subject. Where are we going now? Madame Sophie's bedroom. Ah. We've walked so far, don't say that anymore. They can't hear you. Madame Sophie wants to see you. Huh? Really? Really? If you dare to run again, it won't be me who will find you. Chapter 38 Admission. Far away in the Atlantic Ocean, a cargo ship full of goods and people with dreams drifted alone on the sea. My name is Angus, and I am a kind capitalist from America. I swear to God, there has never been a person in the world as handsome and charming as me. I only need a glance. Any high-ranking flower or iceberg beauty will surrender to my feet. But what makes me unhappy is that there are always people who want to climb into my bed, men and women, and even other kinds of creatures, such as cats, dogs, lions, coyotes. I can always find strange things in my bed. For example, now there is a bag of damn potatoes sleeping with me. Damn it. You idiot, what are you doing? If you crush my potatoes, I will make soup with you tonight. Franz and Kalimi walked to the palace gate, and Sarah and a royal carriage were already waiting there. Archduke Franz and Archduke Kalimi, good afternoon, Sarah said respectfully. Kalimi's eyes moved downwards for a moment, then he looked back. Franz, are we going to meet Milosh this time? No, we are going to the Old Town Opera House. Going to the Opera House. Kalimi scratched his head. You know me. I don't have any artistic talent. I can't appreciate that kind of thing, Uncle Kalimi. There will be a lot of artworks, but we are not going to appreciate art. Oh? Then what are we going to do? Although, Uncle Kalimi, get in the car first. Let's talk slowly in the car. A guard opened the door of the car. The car was quite spacious. After Franz and Kalimi entered the car, the guard closed the door. Sarah sat next to the driver, and two guards stood at the back of the car. The driver whipped the wheel and the wheels began to roll. Franz, why didn't you take your 6-horse carriage? Are you planning to sneak out to play? Your mother will kill me for such a serious crime as sneaking you out of the palace. I have already obtained my mother's consent. It is really not appropriate to take a carriage that is easy to be recognized this time. You haven't told me what we are going to do. To watch a farce, huh? Isn't it still watching a play? This time it was Franz's turn to be speechless. Every year in Europe there is a grand underground trade fair. This year it happens to be in Vienna. Let's go and see it. What about Serbia? What about Prince Mountain's trouble? Of course, everything must be planned for the long term, and we can't rush. And if we do it, we must do it to the best of our ability. A good start is essential. Karimi was a little confused. A good start? Is there any reward for fighting a war? Half an hour later, Franz and Karimi finally arrived at their destination. Franz put on a mask and handed one to Karimi. Oh my god, I'm too old to play with this, Karimi complained. If you don't want to be recognized, wear it. Otherwise, you will appear in a newspaper that specializes in gossip tomorrow. Karimi had to put on the mask reluctantly, and Sarah was ready. The Old City Opera House in front of him is one of the largest theaters in Vienna, and it was reserved today. Everyone must enter with an invitation. Walking through a dark corridor, Franz, Karimi and Sarah came to the temporary reception desk. Franz took out the invitation, and a very beautiful waitress invited Franz and his party to the private room on the top floor. The waitress stood at the door and said in a very sweet voice, I'm at the door. No matter what you need, you can tell me. I will do my best to meet you. Okay, thank you. I will call you if I need you, Franz replied. The waitress bowed, left the room and gently closed the door. Ah, this girl is really good looking. Karimi looked at Sarah again. You are also good looking. Sarah was actually very happy when someone said she was beautiful. It's just that this Grand Duke Karimi is too ugly. And although he has the title of Grand Duke, he is known to everyone to be poor. There is a nickname called the Duke of Quintessence which refers to this Grand Duke Karimi. But she is an actress of the Grand Duchy of Baden Opera House. Of course she is beautiful, Sarah snorted disdainfully. Otherwise, she was not such a rude girl. As the descendant of a big businessman, she received the most elite education since childhood. Under the influence of her surroundings, she was originally a good hand at dealing with people. The latest novel will be first published on the 69th book bar. But after being sent to France, she was affected by Maya's aura. Coupled with the double influence of Franz, the unreliable Grand Duke, Sarah finally changed from a good girl to a star-chasing idiot. Franz, who has such a big heart. Not only did he book the Old Town Opera House, but he also invited actresses from the Grand Duchy of Baden Opera House to be waitresses. The Rothschild family. The Rothschild family was almost a myth in the European financial world in the 19th century. This family believed that the sacred monarchy of the king had been overthrown by the sacred money, and Amschel, Nathan, Solomon, Common and James were the money. Other upstarts usually hesitated, but these five brothers did not. The late Nathan Rothschild had a famous saying, "There are only two countries in the world, one is our family, and the rest is the other." Solomon Rothschild in Vienna is often called King Solomon. Although the Rothschild family feels extremely honored, the real royal family will never agree, and Karimi is one of them. Oh my god, it turns out to be this group of bastards. Are all their family members here? Can I ask someone to send them all to hell? If you send them all to hell now, Austria will become the target of public criticism, and no one will dare to lend me money in the future. I know, this must be a conspiracy of the Rothschild family. They want to use us to make a fortune, right? These evil guys. Uncle Karimi, be more mature. No one will start a war just because they are unhappy. It's just an excuse. But don't think too much. In the eyes of these capitalists, this is just a speculation or a game. Sarah didn't dare to speak because her father was one of the partners of the Rothschild family. But her father did not agree with the Rothschild family's views. He believed that money was only part of power, and the key was to see who was in control of the army. Despite the opposition of his family, Sarah's father spent a lot of money to send his most beloved little daughter to the crown prince as a maid. For many years afterwards, everyone thought he was crazy and a feudal stubborn. Decades later, history will prove that sending his daughter to the crown prince was the most successful investment of his life. Thanks to book friend Flammel for the 5,000 starting coins and monthly tickets. Chapter 39, Boring Auction. Suddenly, a burst of music sounded. The lights in the center of the stage came on, and the noise from the audience soon stopped. A mature and charming woman walked out from behind the scenes. The woman had beautiful blonde hair, which was tied up like a woman. Her bright red lips seemed to have magic, making people want to taste her. She was only covered with a thin layer of gauze, and the outline of the new underwear inside was vaguely visible. This kind of ripe peach is most likely to attract flies. The woman's voice is pleasant, crisp and clean, but also fascinating. Combined with her extremely outstanding appearance and figure, it is not an exaggeration to say that she is a beauty in the world. She also has a special identity, the leader of the Polish Federation Restoration Army, often known as the first beauty in Poland, Mrs. Agata. It is said that her mother was Napoleon's lover, and her husband was also one of the leaders of the Restoration Army. He was arrested by the Russians in 1830 and hanged. In order to raise funds for the restoration of the country, she did everything, and this time she became the host of the auction. Mrs. Agata's talent is very outstanding, and one by one of the goods was sold at a high price under her promotion. Mrs. Agata would occasionally flirt with her charm, causing the audience to howl. Looking at the way Karimi danced at the window of the box, you can know what it is like down there. But Franz heard the occasional curses from the next door, in Russian. The auction items in front were varied, including but not limited to antiques, clothes, very expensive, real estate, horses, slaves, famous wines, guns, and even a British Empire cavalry regiment and a first-class sailing battleship. Karimi was very surprised by Franz's reaction. Not to mention the beauties on the stage, he was not interested in the precious items that appeared one after another. What on earth was Franz doing here? Franz, what's wrong with you? I'm almost asleep. Didn't you bring me here? Just to watch them spend money? Buy some broken porcelain and rotten wood, Uncle Karimi, didn't you shout happily just now? You even said you wanted to have a baby with Mrs. Agata. Your voice is hoarse, Franz said helplessly. Enough, Franz. What are you going to do? Stop selling the lawsuit. After the auction, there will be a gambling game. The stakes may be beyond your imagination. Since we are going to fight Serbia, why not get a good start? So good? How do we play? Guess the winner. Then count me in, Franz, and we'll all bet on the loss. I will surrender when the war starts. Karimi once again refreshed Sarai's perception of idiots. Grand Duke Karimi, is this considered treason? How could it be? Look at how poor our country is now. At most, I can donate half of the money I win to the country. And a small country like Serbia would not dare to make any territorial demands even if it had the guts. Franz was speechless. How could such a good thing happen? What they want to bet on is how long it will take Austria to take Belgrade. If there is a truce or surrender, the bet will be void. Of course, you can also bet on Serbia to win. How do you play this? The specific time and odds will be given later. There was a sudden commotion on the lower floor, and a huge rectangular object covered with black cloth was lifted up. Mrs. Agata was also explaining hard. The last item to be introduced is the finale of this year's trade fair. She is the descendant of the Solomon dynasty of the Abyssinian Empire, Princess Kaffa Malakat, a Christian from Africa. The black cloth was suddenly removed, and the darkness around suddenly disappeared. The dazzling light shone from the top of the head, making Princess Kaffa unable to open her eyes. Suddenly, she found herself locked in an iron cage. Surrounding her was a huge semicircular stage, and the audience was filled with masked men and women who were looking at her as if she were a commodity. She struggled to leave, but it was in vain. People in the audience carefully examined the goods to estimate her value. Princess Kaffa speaks 3 languages, English, Portuguese, and Ethiopian. She is of noble status, beautiful, and what is valuable is that she also believes in God. Her starting price is 100 kilograms of gold, and each bid must not be less than 10 kilograms. Princess Kaffa was indeed an exotic beauty to these Europeans, and what was even more valuable was her status, a princess of the Abyssinian Empire. Her children might be able to inherit a piece of land on the East African plateau, and even use this as an opportunity to enter this land that has not yet been conquered by colonists. Kaffa is a descendant of the Solomon dynasty, and the Tuodris dynasty currently rules Abyssinia. If handled properly, it could provide an excuse to overthrow the Tuodris dynasty, but these empty promises had no appeal to the people present. The Abyssinian Empire was so powerful that small countries could not defeat it. Big countries like Britain and France did not need this excuse at all. As for improving the family's bloodline or for the family's interests, it seemed unnecessary to spend £13,700 to marry an African princess. There was also a biggest problem. How did this princess become a commodity? In all likelihood, she was deceived or kidnapped. No one was willing to accept such goods of unknown origin. No one bid for this last auction item, and Mrs. Agata on the stage was also very embarrassed. After waiting for another 3 minutes, no one bid. Mrs. Agata went backstage to discuss with the seller. Mrs. Agata returned to the stage again and said, the seller announced that he would not lower the price. If no one bids, he will destroy this item. This statement further verified everyone's guess that there was something wrong with this item. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. Soon, a man wearing a black mask walked onto the stage with a spear. The tip of the spear was pointed at Kaffa. Kaffa remembered the Italian teacher who had deceived her with sweet words not long ago. He told her how civilized and beautiful Europe was. He loved her so much. Now Kaffa was sold here by that man, and she was about to die under the spear of this civilization. She hated him so much. If she met that man again, she would tear him into pieces. She regretted so much that she ran away desperately after listening to sweet words. She thought she had found true love, but found that she had been calculated by others. Mrs. Agata looked at Kaffa in the cage and felt sad. Is there no knight willing to save this poor princess? This sentence was the last effort Mrs. Agata could make. These guys are too inhumane, Karimi cursed. Sarah looked at Franz, and Franz nodded. Sarah put a sign in Karimi's hand and raised it high. Mrs. Agata shouted excitedly, Mr. Shusol in Eastbox 2 is willing to pay 100 kilograms to save our princess. Karimi looked around and pointed at himself. Yes, you are Mr. Shusol. Only this mask is big enough to cover your chin. Franz spread his hands. Chapter 40 Gambling. 100 kilograms of gold for the first time, 100 kilograms of gold for the second time, 100 kilograms of gold for the third time. Deal. Congratulations to Mr. Shusol in Eastbox 2. Congratulations to you, Princess Kaffa. Mrs. Agata looked at Princess Kaffa with pity. Princess Kaffa also felt Mrs. Agata's kindness and nodded to express her gratitude. Franz, what are you doing? Karimi, I'm a poor guy, you know. I don't have 13,700 pounds. This girl is holding a sign. If it doesn't work, use her to pay off the debt. Karimi pointed at Sarah on the side. Sarah was completely dismissive of Karimi. At this time, Franz took out a bill. Seeing the bill, Karimi's eyes widened immediately and subconsciously touched his trouser pocket. Franz, when did you? I took it while you were jumping up and down in excitement. It's a check for 10,000 pounds. You owe the remaining 3,700 first. I'll help you find a way. The beautiful waitress outside the door came in with a tray. Franz put Karimi's check on the tray and wrote another check for 3,700 pounds and handed it to the waitress. Thank you for your patronage. Your goods will be handed over in the backstage. Got it? Franz waved his hand. The waitress left tactfully. Karimi leaned against the wall dejectedly, muttering, my money. Then something even more outrageous happened. There was actually a special auction item, which was Mrs. Agata, the host. It seems that in order to raise funds for the restoration of the country, Mrs. Agata decided to devote herself to being a lover for 1 year. Karimi's emotions were out of control and he almost jumped from the box on the 3rd floor. After several unsuccessful attempts, he watched the transaction below at a price of 230 kilograms of gold. This time, Karimi completely collapsed in his seat, and a white shadow seemed to emerge from his mouth. Archduke Franz, Archduke Karimi's soul has left his body. What should we do? Sarah asked. For the sake of the subsequent war, it is better to put his soul back first. Sarah shook Karimi for a long time and finally woke him up. The farce-like auction finally ended. This was completely different from the auction Franz imagined. How could an auction not have a plot of driving up prices? Except for the last time when Lady Agatha herself was the goods, the bidding for other goods rarely exceeded 3 times. Franz wanted to join in the fun, but he had no choice but to appreciate the limited art. It was really unclear what was valuable and what was not. It was not easy to find a piece of Tang Sanke, but Sarah said it was worthless and not many people collected it. Franz bought back a batch of Tang Sanke at a very low price. The process was so uneventful that Franz wanted to sleep. The curtain of the stage was opened, and a giant world map was presented to the audience. There are 3 points marked on the map, namely Egypt, Afghanistan, and Serbia. To be exact, they are the 3 cities of Alexandria, Kabul, and Belgrade. The man who walked to the map pointed at Alexandria in Egypt with an extended command pole. In the Second Turkish-Egyptian War, Egypt defeated its former suzerain, the Ottoman Empire, and even the Ottoman Empire's fleet betrayed it. At this time, the responsible powers in the world, Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, decided to maintain world order. Now a large army from the civilized world is gathering. How long will it take them to win this barbaric battlefield? 3 months, 3 months to 6 months, and more than 6 months. 3 choices, only the smartest people and the wisest choices can help you win this fortune. This time it was a naval battle. Karimi and Franz could only scratch their heads. Although they knew that Egypt would definitely fail, it was really hard to say how long the war would last. Moreover, they were not gamblers and had no expectations for a 1/3 chance of victory. There were many people below who made very logical analyses, and there was also a group of experts who were invited from nowhere to give long speeches. Some people even asked for a separate opening. The prediction was that Egypt would be defeated within a month, and the odds were 1 to 3. However, almost no one was willing to bet that the war would end within a month, because the strongest force in the combined fleet was the British. It would take the British nearly 20 days to reach Egypt, and they would defeat Egypt within a month. That would mean that they would have to conquer Egypt in 10 days, which was simply a fantasy. The second bet was about how long it would take to capture Belgrade if the Austrian Empire and the Principality of Serbia went to war. There were also 3 options, 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and more than 6 months. The enthusiasm for betting on this one was still not high, because many people thought that this battle could not be fought at all. The latest novel was first published on 69 Shuba. Fortunately, Franz secretly let in a group of people through Tefi to promote how brave and warlike the Serbs were and how strong and unyielding they were. Military experts are indispensable. By doubling the numbers in the intelligence and telling them, everyone present has a new understanding of Serbia's military strength. In fact, the strength of the Serbian army does exceed the estimates of Western countries, but there are many internal factions that make it difficult to coordinate. The actual combat effectiveness is not strong. This time it was Sarah's turn to appear. Sarah was about to speak to the loudspeaker, on the balcony of the box, but was unexpectedly beaten by the person in the next box. The Austrian Empire will take Belgrade within a month after the war begins. The man holding the baton on the stage smiled and said, "Okay, sir. Your odds are now 1 to 3, welcome to bet 300. The person in the next box said in stiff French. French was the common language among European nobles in this era. "Okay, this gentleman bets 300 kilograms of gold, and the Austrian Empire will take Belgrade within a month after the war begins. Is there anyone else who wants to bet with this gentleman?" Sarah was a little annoyed that someone beat her to the punch. "I bet 500. Very good. This lady bets 500 kilograms of gold, and the Austrian Empire will take Belgrade within a month after the war begins. Is there anyone else who wants to continue betting?" As expected, everyone did not follow suit. Everyone played their own games. In the end, the odds dropped to 1 to 2, which made Franz very depressed. It was not easy to get these land deeds, but the odds dropped to 2.0 after betting less than 1/3. If you bet all your money and it only makes less than double, it is really not worth it. Sure enough, in other people's gambling, it is a dream to want to kill the banker. Gambling is risky, bet carefully. If you ask for a sure win method, quitting gambling is the only way. The third bet was the British showing off their strength, betting on whether the British Empire could conquer Afghanistan. On the British Empire's conquest of Afghanistan, the British directly bet 5,000 kilograms of gold, and no one on the other side dared to bet against the British. On the one hand, they thought Afghanistan could not win, and on the other hand, they could not come up with so much money. Franz scratched his head. 5,000 kilograms of gold was a lot of money. Converted into Austrian money, it would be 6.85 million guilders, enough to build a long section of railway. Chapter 41. Going home at night. I got home at 4 p.m., so the update will be a little later today, but the number of words should not be less. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42. Gambling Agreement. The plains of North America and Russia are cornfields, Chicago and Odessa are barns. Canada and the Baltic region are our forests for timber, Australia has our sheep pastures, Argentina and the western prairies have our cattle, and Peru sends her silver. The gold of South Africa and Australia flows to London. Hindus and Orientals grow tea for us, and all our coffee, sugar and spice plantations are in the East Indies. Spain and France are our vineyards, and the Mediterranean is our orchard. Britain in this era has established world maritime hegemony and has the most extensive colonies in the world. As the first country in the world to complete the Industrial Revolution, its strength is unmatched by other countries of the same era, and its total economic output ranks first in the world. No matter how the Earth rotates, the sun will always shine over the British Empire, which is a veritable empire on which the sun never sets. Therefore, the British aristocrats and capitalists are also rich and powerful, and they have almost blind confidence in their own strength. This is not bad for Franz, because as the saying goes, arrogant soldiers will be defeated. It just seems that it is not easy for Franz to make this money from the British. It's not that Franz didn't have confidence in Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, but the British set the price too high at 6.58 million guilders, which seemed a bit too high for the masses, or the British didn't want anyone to play with them. The purpose of the bet was to show off one's strength. Franz's assets that could be used added up to no more than 2 million guilders. Franz looked at Sarah. "Sarah, how much can your bank lend me?" "Franz, are you crazy? The British are invincible. They captured the capital of Afghanistan with only 200 casualties. And now there are 23,000 British in Afghanistan. How could they lose? Moreover, they only gamble and don't offer odds, which is obviously to maximize their own interests. The strength of the two sides is so different that 1 to 9 is not too much. Don't worry, the British will definitely fail. The British are strong in the navy, and Afghanistan is a landlocked country. Their supplies will not keep up sooner or later. No matter how strong the British are, They can't fight on an empty stomach, but the British can still increase their troops. These British have to support the Afghan war in order to win back their gambling money. Although I don't know who they are, they must be powerful people in Britain. Silly girl, the cost of maintaining the British garrison is much higher than our gambling money. And there are also the Russians. Do you think the Russians will sit idly by and watch the British occupy Afghanistan? But the Afghans asked Russia for help before, didn't Russia refuse? Franz was speechless for a moment, a little angry and embarrassed, grabbing Sarah's pigtail. I don't see you care about national affairs usually. Why are you so smart today? The Jews are really obsessed with money. The Russians rejected Afghanistan because their main focus is not here now. If Britain really gains a foothold, will the Russians be anxious? Central Asia is the Russians' backyard. How can they give it to others? France, the Afghans are really too backward. Do you think the indigenous army of South America can gallop on the European continent? The two sides are not at the same level in terms of weapons, manpower and organization. Karimi said with the eyes of a soldier. Back then, the Russians could not compare with Napoleon's army. Didn't they still beat Napoleon to pulp, the guy next door? It's interesting. Dare to challenge the British. Do you know who the other party is? The person in the next box asked in stiff German. It doesn't matter who it is. The British are bound to lose, Franz replied. Oh? How come? You know, Afghanistan is a transportation hub connecting West Asia, South Asia, and Central Asia. It is an absolute battleground for military strategists. It has been the key to the South Asian subcontinent since ancient times. It doesn't matter how important it is. Afghanistan has no resources, and capitalists are profit-seeking. British capitalists don't care about the so-called strategy. They don't need wars that can't bring benefits. If the British government insists on strategy, there will be only one result, the collapse of the cabinet. Well said, these capitalists are indeed short-sighted and don't care about national interests at all. So kid, I'll give you 3,000 kilograms of gold. Let's play a game with the British, okay, Sarah? Make up the rest, or I'll pull out your braids. Karimi didn't say anything. He just felt that the voice next door was a little familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. But it doesn't matter. A guy who is old and still fooling around with Franz should not be a serious person. Karimi has read a lot of war history and war reports, and has a deep understanding of the strength of the British. He was not optimistic about Afghanistan. He felt that the role of guerrilla warfare was limited after all, and victory or defeat would still be determined by the frontal battlefield. Sarah walked to the balcony of the box and met the messenger in the next box. The other party was a tall young man. At the same time, she also saw the messenger in the opposite box, who was taking off his hat in her direction. The other party took off his hat politely and looked well educated. His jawline was beautiful, but the smile at the corner of his mouth made people feel frivolous. 3,000 for East Box 1 and 2,000 for East Box 2, the host in the audience was also a little shocked. Oh, huh? This is an unexpected development. Someone actually doubts the strength of the British Empire. Salute to these two fearless challengers. Are you sure you want to participate in this bet? The bet money will be deposited in the Rothschild Bank in the form of physical collateral. Then the bet is established on whether the British Empire can conquer Afghanistan within 10 years. If the British Empire succeeds, the guests in West Box 1 can get 5,000 kilograms of gold from the guests in East Box 1 and East Box 2, and vice versa. In addition, the loser must pay an annual custody fee of 0.3%. Do both parties have any objections? The latest novels are first published on Liuji 9 Shuba. No, the East Side answered. West Side. The British gentleman with a top hat raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. You are doomed to lose. That's what I want to say. Sarah turned to look at Franz, who just smiled and didn't answer. Franz felt that such a provocation was really bad, and that he would lose face if he quarreled with the other side. However, Karimi suddenly stood up, walked to the balcony and said to the loudspeaker, British kid, your mother is calling you for dinner. There was a burst of laughter in the theater. Compared with any victory declaration, everyone obviously liked to hear such a rude retort. People in the venue usually pretend to be mature and steady. It was rare for them to put on masks and get carried away for once. Moreover, the traditional aristocrats on the European continent were dissatisfied with a nouveau-riche Britain. The bourgeoisie of various countries have always been resentful of being excluded by British businessmen, and there was constant laughter in the venue. But the young man opposite seemed to have gotten used to it and didn't care. Instead, He made an elegant gesture and turned to enter the box. Franz sat quietly in the box, leaning back on the recliner with his hands on his head. Why are auctions in this era so boring? Actually, this is a trade fair. Many people have already set their goals before coming. The starting price of the items is also very high. The organizer is showing off. The price unit is gold, which also makes many people stay away. It seems that this time I bought a trouble. Do I have to build a fleet in the next few decades? This option was not in Franz's original plan. However, it seems not bad to have the opportunity to destroy the British fleet with my own hands. Chapter 43, Ali, the King of Power. Kavala in Macedonia, Greece, faces the Aegean Sea and is an ancient port with beautiful scenery. This small city is home to many people of different nationalities. They make their livings by fishing and doing business. Muhammad Ali was born in this city. His parents died one after another in his childhood, and his 17 brothers and sisters had their own thoughts and were not close to each other. Ali had never been to school, but he was very smart. He joined the local army, and once the army went to a village to collect taxes. But the people in that village refused to pay taxes and drove out the person in charge of collecting taxes. Ali volunteered to take 4 men and disguised himself as a villager to sneak into the mosque where they were praying. When the elders in the village knelt down, he and his men took out their weapons to control the elders in the village. Ali put the knife across the elder's neck and said, "If you don't pay taxes, I will kill him. Don't think that I will surrender later. As long as I have a breath, I will kill those who don't pay taxes." Ali successfully got the tax with his ruthlessness and cunning, and the garrison commander was very satisfied. As a result, he was appreciated by the garrison commander, who adopted him as his son and promoted him to be an officer. The salary of officers in this era was insignificant, and if you wanted to make money, you had to do a side job. However, there were not many opportunities to make money, so Ali chose to become a tobacco dealer. He used his position to purchase cheap tobacco, evade tariffs, and collude with local officials and businessmen. And after the death of the local official, he inherited his position and industry. At this time, he had grown from an orphan to a well-known and wealthy big man, which can be said to have completed the counterattack of Diocletian. But his legend has just begun. Napoleon's invasion of Egypt broke his originally peaceful life. The Ottoman army was in disrepair, and the Sultan allowed local nobles to recruit private soldiers to fight for the country. Ali successfully formed a powerful Albanian cavalry. Ali's army entered Egypt and defeated the French army in the Battle of Ramana. It showed his military talent and also made his status rise. He became the commander of the Albanian League with 4,000 officers and soldiers. At this time, Egypt's internal affairs were corrupt and its economy was declining. The Mamluk army, which was usually invincible, collapsed at the first touch and suffered heavy losses. However, the French did not bring the peace and freedom they said. Napoleon used fame and fortune to buy off the unpopular Mamluk upper class, and tried to solve the problem completely with violence. If anyone takes up arms against the French army, his village will be razed to the ground. It comes from Napoleon's Book of the High Egyptian People. Napoleon appointed the executioner Bartolome to be in charge of public security. Bartolome was bloodthirsty and paraded through the city every day with hundreds of gendarmes in charge of public security. People often saw him holding a crescent-shaped sword in one hand and dragging the bodies of the beheaded in the other hand to ask Napoleon for a reward. But Bartolome's atrocities were appreciated by Napoleon because Napoleon himself did the same thing. Napoleon drove away all the residents on Mount Mugadam and around the castle, demolished houses, built city walls, and aimed cannons at the city, as if he was ready to go to war with the Egyptians at any time. Egyptians living in Cairo had to worry about the cannons on the mountain and the garrisons in the city all day long. Napoleon's advisors judged others by their own experience and suggested that Napoleon raze all places where barricades could be built to the ground, and forced every household to light a long burning lamp at night, and severely punished them. However, the patrolling French army found a new business opportunity through this. Once they found that a family's oil lamp was blown out by the wind or the oil was exhausted, they would come to the door to ask for money and property. If they did not comply, they would be beaten and killed. What's more, in order to extort more money, French soldiers often deliberately smashed the oil lamps at the door of the people. Not only Egyptian civilians suffered, but Mamluks and local nobles also became fat sheep in the eyes of the French. Their land was confiscated, their property was requisitioned, and any non-cooperation might be considered hostile to the French. Napoleon's tyranny eventually led to two major uprisings of the Egyptian people. Napoleon's army was defeated in Syria and the French army was forced to withdraw from Egypt. The French rule over Egypt was an unprecedented disaster for the Egyptians, but it also objectively promoted the awakening of Egyptian national consciousness. The French invasion severely weakened the power of the Mamluks and the Ottomans, but only one person's power was quietly growing, and that was Ali. After the war, there were three forces in Egypt: the Ottoman army, the British, and the Mamluks as landlords. The Ottoman army had 30,000 ground forces led by Grand Vizier Yusuf, stationed in Cairo and northern Egypt. There was also an Ottoman navy of 6,000 along the coast. Khusraw Pasha, the newly appointed governor of Egypt by the Sultan, wanted to completely eliminate the Mamluks and restore the Sultan's rule in Egypt. The number of remaining Mamluk forces was far less than before the war, and there were many factions within them, fighting each other. They were roughly divided into two factions: the pro-British faction, represented by Elfi; the other pro-French faction, represented by Badr. They all wanted to rely on foreign forces to restore their former rule in order to achieve the goal of saving the country in a roundabout way. The British Expeditionary Force was concentrated in Cairo and Alexandria. After driving the French away, Britain refused to withdraw its troops on the grounds that the British army could only withdraw after the situation in various parts of Egypt stabilized. All three parties wanted to control Egypt and the Nile River basin. The first to be eliminated were the British. France was unwilling to fail and strongly opposed the British occupation of Egypt. After the signing of the Four-Power Treaty, Britain was forced to withdraw its troops. The latest novels are first published on the sixth book bar. But when the British left, they took the leader of the pro-British faction, Elfi, with them so that they could interfere in Egyptian affairs in the future. After that, Britain and France instigated the confrontation between the Mamluks and the Ottoman Sultan. The contradictions deepened and the society was in turmoil. In troubled times, heroes often appear. Ali decided to take advantage of the contradictions between the Mamluks and the Ottoman Sultan to gain a foundation for himself in this troubled time. Ali first took advantage of the conflict between the Albanian Legion and the Guards, instigated the Albanian Legion leader Tahir to revolt, and killed the upright governor Khusraw Pasha. Then the Guards launched another coup and killed Tahir. The two leaders of the Albanian Legion and the Guards were killed one after another, and the Guards were greatly weakened. Only Ali took advantage of it and became the leader of the Albanian Legion. He colluded with the Mamluks, defeated the Guards, and supported the Mamluk leader Badr to openly rebel. He also defeated the Ottoman army that came to suppress Egypt and killed the new governor. Now Ali has only one obstacle left on the road to conquer Egypt. That is the last Mamluk. Chapter 44, King of Power Ali Zhuang. The Mamluks regarded themselves as the first heroes of the anti-French war and the main force that defeated the Ottomans. Coupled with a history of ruling for hundreds of years, it was easy for the Egyptians to be convinced. Although Badr did not have many soldiers at this time, his reputation and fame had reached the peak. Just when Ali was racking his brains to figure out how to deal with this big trouble, the British helped him a lot. Seeing that the Ottomans' power in Egypt was over, the British decided to send Elfi back to Egypt to grab the fruits of victory. Elfi brought the British money and promises to buy people's hearts. And promised that as long as he was in power, the country would be protected by Britain and everyone would be able to have peace and happiness. Elfi's return made Badr's position in the Mamluks precarious. And Elfi brought not only pounds to Egypt, but also a 500-man mercenary army. Badr's position was precarious under the offensive of money, which was a godsend for Ali. Governor, Ali emphasized, Elfi's men are recruiting people everywhere. Those mercenaries are doing atrocities in the city. Yesterday, another innocent citizen was killed by a grenade thrown by two drunken mercenaries. The grenades of this period are actually more like watermelon mines during the anti-Japanese war than modern grenades. These beasts drove away the French and defeated the Ottomans, and now these British beasts are here. Elfi, the running dog of the British. A traitor. When the enemy troops were approaching, he fled to Britain. Now he actually brought the British to rob my sack. Not only that, our Albanian Legion has not received military pay for several months. Elfi has contacted several senior officers in the Legion and expressed his willingness to provide us with military pay, hoping that we can remain neutral in the future. Ali certainly would not miss this opportunity to add fuel to the fire. Badr, whose blood was boiling, was even more furious after hearing this. Recruiting soldiers and horses while asking the Albanian Legion to remain neutral. Is there any need to say this? Elfi, this shameless bastard, wanted to seize power by force. After all, we are all descendants of the Mamluks. Elfi's aunt's cousin's niece is Badir's daughter-in-law. He originally wanted to break bones and tendons, but now he wants to play dirty. But Badir really has no money now. Almost all of his property was confiscated by the French, and he owed a lot of foreign debts to fight against the Ottomans. The Albanian military must be paid enough. Otherwise, God knows whether these foreigners will side with Elfi. General Ali, I now appoint you as the commander of the First Egyptian Army. The salary of you and your Albanian army will be borne by the Egyptian government. Don't worry, you have shed blood and worked hard to restore Egypt, and I will never forget you. It is my honor, Governor. I swear to Allah that I will defend the fruits of our victory to the death and never let those damned beasts get their hands on it. Ali's performance was impeccable, as if he was really looking forward to this position and vowed to serve Badir as a vanguard. General Ali, you should tell your army this good news now. I still have something to talk to Mr. Manlulu. Ali crossed his hands on his chest and bowed to Badir. He lowered his head and walked out, closing the door outside. Ali almost laughed out loud. These Mamluks were really stupid. Now he can receive 2 military salaries, one for his men and one for himself as a reserve. After making sure that Ali left, Badir called his chief of staff Manlulu. Manlulu, I need you to draft a document for me. We need more tax revenue, and we must keep Ali and his Albanian army firmly in our hands. But, Governor, the tax burden of the Egyptian people has exceeded that of the Ottoman Empire, and is almost the same as when the French were here. It's too late to worry about that. Now Elfi has extended his hand to Ali's army. That won't work either. We will provoke a civil uprising. We can also borrow money from those merchants, and we can provide them with privileges and preferential treatment. No, those merchants have been squeezed dry by Napoleon, and they don't have a penny now. Badir said this because, on the one hand, Egyptian merchants had indeed been slaughtered by Napoleon before, and on the other hand, his family itself had inextricable ties with the big merchants, and he still needed the support of those big merchants. Manlulu also knew about this relationship, but still made a final effort. We can borrow money from them first. As long as we have something on Elfi, we can kill Elfi and then cut the salary of the Albanian army. We can't pay the interest. You know our government is on the verge of bankruptcy. For the future of Egypt, let the people be patient for a while. Badir acted as if he was heartbroken. Manlulu knew that it was impossible to do anything, so he had to sit down and start drafting new tax documents. While Elfi and Badir were wary of each other, Ali had already begun to collude with Hirsi, the commander of the Ottoman garrison in Alexandria. And he gained the support of the Egyptian clerics, gentry and wealthy people. Ali promised the Egyptian cleric that he would be rewarded and guaranteed his position when he came to power in the future. He promised the merchants to end the chaotic situation as soon as possible, and promised the gentry and landlords to return the land occupied by the Mamluks. Soon Badir found something on Elfi. It was said that one of the mercenaries brought by Elfi looked like the Ottoman Sultan. Therefore, they suspected that Elfi had defected to the Ottomans, and supporters of both sides fought each other, building barricades in the city and shooting at each other. Ali was ordered to enter the city and expel Elfi and his forces. But before Badir announced the tax cuts, thousands of Egyptians took to the streets after the chaos ended, opposing Badir and his extortion, and even more so the Mamluk nobles' perverse actions. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Merchants closed their markets, workers went on strike, and the whole of Cairo joined the team against Badir. The police were unable to stop them and could only report to Badir. The protesting crowd held high the jihad flag and beat the Egyptian drum, a medium-sized drum that looks a bit like an upside-down vase, and took to the streets. Badir, you cannibal. Your family is a bunch of parasites, a bunch of vampires. You Mamluks eat our flesh and drink our blood. It has been hundreds of years. It's time to pay the price. The angry crowd threw torches at the governor's palace. Ali, who was ordered to quell the rebellion, took the opportunity to declare his support for the people of Cairo and led his army to attack Badir's mansion. Badir fled in a hurry, and the Egyptian regime fell into Ali's hands. Vienna, Old Town Opera House. Franz and his party finally came to the backstage after delivering the mortgage contract. The unfortunate princess signed a 60-year indenture contract and was begging Franz and his party in Portuguese in a large iron cage. Please let me go, I am a princess of the Abyssinian Empire. Send me back, I can give you a lot of money, I can make you a noble, Sarah handed Princess Kaffa a statement written in Ethiopian. Kaffa Malakit violated the royal rules, left the palace without permission and betrayed his motherland. He is now expelled from the royal family. This is hereby declared. After reading this, Kaffa's eyes went dark and he fell into the cage. Chapter 45, Ali, the King of Power Part 2. Franz, what did you ask Sarah to show her? Why did she faint? Karimi was a little curious. She had a good impression of this princess who could speak Portuguese. The waiter of the Rothschild family just delivered the royal statement of the Abyssinian Empire. Now she is no longer a princess. And the seller has cleverly left. If we return the goods now, the Rothschild family is willing to bear half of the compensation, Franz said expressionlessly. Ah. So we spent 137,000 guilders to buy a princess who can't speak German and is not a princess. This Princess Kaffa is also very pitiful. She was deceived and came here to lose her royal identity. Aren't you also a Grand Duke who is not a Grand Duke? Sarah spoke nonsense without restraint. The Karimi family can only receive a royal annuity and live in the suburbs of Vienna, relying on hundreds of acres of land. This is a well-known fact in the aristocratic circle of Vienna, and no one regards their family as a royal family. Karimi doesn't care about this matter on the surface, but it has always been a pain in his heart. He was a member of the royal family but he was not treated like a royal family. He even had to apply to enter the palace. He did not apply to the royal family, but to the government. He had been ridiculed and treated differently since he was a child. He and Albrecht were cousins and both entered the military academy. His grades were similar to Albrecht's, and Archduke Karl even said that he was more talented in cavalry command. But as soon as Albrecht entered the military academy, he was regarded as a rising star and the future of the army. But he was called a big-chinned old monster and a freak. Albrecht joined the army after graduation and was in charge of the elite troops in Salzburg. He was thrown into the Vienna City Defense Force and given the rank of colonel in the City Defense Force. It was even more ridiculous to know that the Vienna City Defense Force was full of guys who just wanted to eat and die. There were dozens of major generals and hundreds of colonels in the Vienna City Defense Force. In Vienna, one brick could kill 2 officers of the City Defense Force. Karimi gritted his teeth and panted, but he also looked at the princess who shared the same fate as him again, and couldn't help but feel a little more pity. Franz grabbed Sarah's pigtail and said, "Hurry up and apologize to Uncle Karimi. You are getting more and more shameless." Sarah was pulled in pain and said, "I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Please spare me." "Franz, you're going to break my pigtail." Karimi thought about it and felt that he seemed to have thought too much about arguing with the child. He quickly stopped Franz. How could a real royal family bully a girl casually? It seems that I am more like a royal family, haha. After Ali drove away Badr, he completely defeated the Mamluk forces in Egypt. But he was not in a hurry to crown himself. Instead, he pretended to be posturing and played a game of 3 requests and 3 resignations. He invited the Ottoman Hirsi Pasha to serve as the governor of Egypt, and sent some rebels to Istanbul to show his loyalty. Hirsi did not trust Ali, and in the name of the Sultan, he ordered Ali and his army to leave their garrisons and fight against the remaining Mamluk forces. At the same time, Hirsi wrote a letter asking the Sultan to send more troops to Egypt. Hirsi continued to do evil, and his men did everything they could to make money. However, Egypt at this time was no longer the Egypt of the past. In the past, Egyptians were used to being submissive, but now their national consciousness has awakened. At the same time, the clerics, gentry and merchants who had already allied with Ali also played an important role in it. Egypt established the Egyptian Council of Elders. It was proposed that no taxes should be levied without the permission of the Council of Elders, and the Ottoman army should get out of Cairo. Hirsi Pasha naturally found it difficult to accept, so he mobilized troops to try to suppress the uprising. The Egyptians built barricades in the city, and the 2 sides were deadlocked for several days. The Council of Elders suddenly announced the removal of Hirsi Pasha and supported Ali as governor. The reinforcements Hirsi called back became his own death warrant in an instant. Ali's army entered the city like a hero's triumphant victory. He announced in the square that we must abide by the law, never impose heavy taxes, and respect the Council of Elders. If we violate this oath, we will be punished by both humans and gods. Hirsi defended the castle on the mountain while asking the Sultan to continue to send troops to reinforce Egypt. However, the uprising soon spread from Cairo to all parts of Egypt. The number of rebels increased rapidly, and they repelled the attacks of the Ottomans many times. However, Ali still had a trump card. He sent people with a large sum of money to Istanbul to bribe Ottoman executives everywhere. In the end, the Ottoman Sultan decided to follow the will of heaven and the will of the people and appointed Ali as the governor of Egypt. Since then, Egypt, like the Principality of Serbia, has actually gained independence. However, it is impossible for Britain and France, who let Ali pick peaches, to give up. The remnants of the two Mamluk forces, Elfi and Badr, were supported by foreign forces. Elfi even gathered thousands of soldiers in Fayoum, and Badr also organized local armed forces. With the support of the British, Elfi returned to the heartland of Egypt. The British persuaded the Sultan to depose Ali, appoint Elfi as governor, and pay tribute of £8,000 to the Sultan every year. The Sultan also had no good feelings for Ali, who was two-faced, and ordered Ali to be deposed, Elfi to be appointed, and sent an army of 3,000 people to cooperate with Elfi. At this time, Elfi already had 7,000 troops, including 600 cavalry. Ali knew that it was impossible for him to defeat the British and the Sultan, so he pretended to accept the Sultan's order. At the same time, he actively prepared for war, on the one hand, and asked the Council of Elders to write a joint letter to plead for mercy. On the other hand, he played tricks to welcome back the Badr faction and told Badr that he was forced, and Elfi was their common enemy. The Badr faction and the Elfi faction were not in harmony, and at the same time, the contradictions between Britain and France increased and both sides refused to give in. After the internal struggle, their strength was greatly reduced. The latest novel is published on the 6th-9th book bar. Ali still had one last trick, which was to continue bribing. Perhaps even Ali himself did not expect that the envoys he sent to bribe were warmly welcomed in Istanbul, and various high-ranking officials expressed their willingness to help. The corruption of Ottoman officials far exceeded the Sultan's imagination. A large number of Ottoman officials accepted bribes to plead for Ali, and even withheld supplies from the expeditionary force, causing the Ottomans to lose their will to fight. Ali deployed troops in the country to prepare for a decisive battle with Elfi. However, the Albanian corps under his command was no longer the brave army that could only fight the French. Ali himself was obsessed with power and the army was accustomed to this kind of life. They lacked training and were afraid of death. As a result, they collapsed at the touch of Elfi's army. At the critical moment, it was Hütter's militia that blocked Elfi's attack. Elfi besieged Hütter for more than 2 months without taking it, giving Ali's army a chance to breathe. The reorganized Albanian corps attacked Elfi from the rear and lifted the siege of Hütter. The Battle of Hütter discredited Elfi. Meanwhile, Ali's plan was a great success. Enticed by money, the Ottoman Sultan changed his mind and decided to let Ali continue to serve as governor, but he had to pay a tribute of £30,000 a year and send his eldest son to Istanbul as a hostage. Elfi had to disband his troops and flee alone after running out of money. Badr also suffered heavy losses in the battle with Elfi and was unable to compete with Ali for control of Egypt. Chapter 46 Ali Pasha and the 40 Thieves, 1. In fact, Franz had wanted to do this a long time ago when he saw Sarah's two pigtails swinging back and forth. It was rare that Sarah stepped on a landmine all the way today. If Franz didn't help her, he might be hated by Karimi. People like Karimi are very vengeful, and their means of revenge are often quite extreme. When such people take revenge, you often don't even have the chance to apologize. Uncle Karimi, this Princess Kaffa is in your care. You know, there is no place for her in the palace. Franz loosened Sarah's pigtails. Sarah covered her hair and looked at Franz viciously. After all, Franz was usually very peaceful. I don't know why he suddenly went crazy today. But Sarah soon realized the problem. No matter how Franz treated her, he would go crazy as long as he wanted. Sarah had no choice but to bear it. Thinking of this, Sarah couldn't help but feel a little sad. Yes, Franz took out a small stick wrapped in oil paper. For you. Sarah untied the thin string of the package, and inside was a small wooden stick with a candy cube wrapped at one end. HMPH, stingy, but the curious Sarah still picked up the small wooden stick and looked at it carefully. What is this, lollipop? You will like it, Franz replied with a smile. It's more fun than chewing it directly in your mouth. Franz liked this little idea very much. Although it was a small change, the effect was very good. It hardly increased the cost, but the price could be several times higher than before, and it was easier to sell. Franz has successfully bribed Maya and his little sister Maria, and even the seemingly cold Ruth now likes it. Franz has applied for a patent and plans to acquire a candy company to make a fortune. Franz, why leave this girl to me to take care of? You know I can't even take care of myself, and I don't want me to take care of a princess. If you really want to make trouble, your little friend, the heir of the Taffy family, is a good choice. No, you are very good, Franz replied. Why? Do you know that our faith does not allow the buying and selling of slaves? You are the only one who can speak Portuguese, and you are an older bachelor. In this family, it is a crime to be unmarried at the age of 30. Fortunately, our emperor did not think of you, otherwise he would definitely arrest you and put you in jail. Who said that? We just bought a contract. In the past, the rent tax contracting system was implemented in rural Egypt, which was to give the power to collect agricultural and land taxes to tax farmers. Generally speaking, tax farmers had to pay a year's money in advance to the Ottoman Empire, and then obtain the power to collect taxes from farmers. The status of tax farmers can be inherited, and the former slave army Mamluks occupied most of the positions of tax farmers. They controlled the army and land taxes, had great power, and could demand taxes from any village. They made up excuses to win over the gentry, drank big bowls of wine, and ate big chunks of meat. Under a series of operations by these people, one tax could often become several or even dozens of taxes that were repeatedly harvested. The final tax amount would often be several times or even dozens of times the tax paid to the Sultan. After they got the money, they did not improve agriculture and build water conservancy projects, but simply bought land and foreign luxury goods. Eventually, Egypt's 1,000-year-old water conservancy and irrigation projects turned into floods. Only a little more than half of the Nile Delta, which nurtured the ancient Egyptian civilization, can be cultivated. The output of agricultural products is only 1/4 of that in ancient times. Food is scarce and plagues continue. The Ottoman and Mamluk nobles don't care about the lives of Egyptians at all, they just want money and food. The experience of handicrafts is similar. The Ottoman nobles and Mamluks made up excuses and imposed heavy taxes on all industries, and even directly framed and confiscated their homes. But with the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the status of merchants improved and commerce continued to develop, and eventually early handicraft workshops were born. It's just that the scale is limited, and no new class has been formed that is enough to change the country. For Ali, the power of the Mamluks has not been completely eliminated. Britain and France are in Egypt, and the Ottomans regard themselves as the suzerain of Egypt. Ali abolished the tax farming system as soon as he came to power. But after the Napoleonic Wars and several years of the War of Independence, farmland was barren, rivers were silted up, the economy was backward, and people were living in poverty. It was not enough to just abolish the bond system, he began to seize land from the former allies and hostile Mamluks. First, he used harsh laws and military actions to weaken the power of religion and the Mamluks. He pretended to negotiate with the Mamluks and invited the Mamluk upper class to participate in the name of a military parade. These Mamluks brought a large number of ceremonial guards and guards to the meeting in order to show their strength. At the military parade, the unsuspecting Mamluks walked through a road with high stone walls on both sides and downhill stone steps in front. At Ali's order, the Albanian army, which had been ambushed for a long time, pushed countless boulders off the wall. The boulders rolled in the narrow passage, leaving shocking bloodstains as they rolled down the stone steps. The latest novel is published on 69 Shuba. However, the Mamluks had not yet recovered from the shock of the rolling boulders, and Ali's soldiers appeared in front and behind. The soldiers fired at the narrow passage, and the Mamluks without cover could not resist the attacks from the front, back and top. The remaining Mamluks could only break out at all costs. It is said that a Mamluk successfully broke through and brought the news to other Mamluks. But Ali did not give them a chance to continue to survive, and directly ordered the killing of Mamluk members across the country. After a year of bloody suppression, the Mamluks finally withdrew from the stage of history. After obtaining the land of the Mamluks, Ali adopted a policy of light taxation, water conservancy, and encouraging farming. He also distributed the land in his hands to his confidants, making them the new nobles of the country. Ali himself became the largest landlord in Egypt. Ali was aware of the gap between himself and the West. While developing agriculture, he also attached importance to industrial development. He successively invested in the construction of textile mills, sugar mills, and paper mills. There were a total of 29 civilian factories, including tanneries and dye factories, with a total number of workers reaching 30,000. As a military man, He attached great importance to the military industry and established gun factories, gunpowder factories and shipyards. These factories were firmly controlled by Ali, and British and French experts were hired as consultants. He also established a state monopoly system for some commodities and increased taxation. He also funded the establishment of universities and hospitals and sent students to Europe, most of whom went to France. In view of the poor performance of the Albanian Corps in the suppression of the Mamluks, he decided to train a new army. He also abolished the mercenary service system, implemented conscription, and planned to build a strong navy to fight against Britain and France. Chapter 47, No update tonight, thanks and subsequent plot adjustments. No more recommendations next week, I'll take a break today. Thank you all for your support. Special thanks to the recent donors. Flammel, Bookfriend 20180729053457934, Bookfriend 20170929104451757, Zyadang 246. Then there's the plot issue. Some readers complained that the pace was slow, there were too many useless dialogues, some characters didn't play a big role, and many chapters didn't promote the plot. I decided to start skipping the plot and get to 1848 Storm Year, Volume 2, as soon as possible. Chapter 48 Ali Pasha and the 40 Thieves, 2. Ali also followed the example of the West, set up a cabinet, set up 6 ministries of military, justice, finance, commerce, education, and health, and monopolized political power. He also often visited various parts of the country to understand the implementation of policies, and established a strict ruling system, quickly changed the political outlook of Egypt through severe laws and punishments, and achieved a unified situation in the country. So did Ali, who worked so hard to enrich the country and strengthen the army, succeed? Ali's reforms in construction promoted and restored production, making Egypt's economy prosperous. The country's cultivated land increased by 1.3 million feddans, about 7.8 million mu, the national fiscal revenue increased by 200%, and the national population increased to 4.5 million. In terms of military, the number of army personnel increased to 200,000, the navy to 20,000, and had 32 warships. Invaded Sudan and took over the Crete island during the Greek War of Independence. Launched the first Turkish-Egyptian war to invade Palestine and Syria. So far, Ali can be said to be very successful, from an orphan to the actual ruler of Egypt, and beat the former suzerain to the ground. The first African country in modern times to complete westernization reforms. But unfortunately, all Europe wanted was a watchdog, not a wolf that wanted to eat meat. On July 15, 1840, Britain, Russia, Austria, Prussia, and Turkey signed the Treaty of London in London. Ali issued an ultimatum to Egypt, which he flatly refused. He did not want his dream of becoming a great power to be shattered. Accepting this treaty meant that his lifelong efforts would be wasted, and Egypt would become independent and return to the past as a vassal of the Ottoman Empire. In addition, he had been overwhelmed by his previous victory. When he met with a British ambassador, he actually said, "If the five-power alliance wants to use force, then please do so. I, Muhammad Ali, am waiting here. If you British want to act alone, I welcome it even more." Ali ordered the whole country to enter a state of war, strengthen city defenses, reserve food, and actively prepare for war, ready to go to war with the Europeans. However, the Allies did not really treat an African country as a dish. In September, the British fleet joined the fleets of Russia, Austria, and Turkey Ottoman Empire, to enter the Mediterranean and bombard Beirut. 1,500 British troops landed in Beirut and swept through Ali's troops on the coast of Lebanon. At the same time, the British played their traditional expertise, inciting the Syrians to revolt and providing them with guns and ammunition. The Syrians had long been dissatisfied with Ali's rule, and war broke out for a while. The Egyptian army could not confront the British army head-on, and their more than 30 warships at sea were like toy ships in front of the four-nation combined fleet. Even the Austrian navy, the weakest among the powers, could unilaterally beat the Egyptian navy. Just with a vanguard of the combined fleet, the Egyptians lost a quarter of their fleet in a tentative exchange of fire. The French once supported Egypt, but seeing that Egypt was doomed, they asked Ali to make concessions and negotiate with the Sudan. After listening to people's advice and having a full meal, Ali, as a generation of heroes, immediately put aside his face and began to negotiate with the Ottoman Sultan. Ali expressed his willingness to withdraw troops from Adana, Crete, the Arabian Peninsula and Syria to preserve his hereditary rule in Egypt and lifelong jurisdiction over Acre, a region in Syria. But with the world's #1 troublemaker around, it was not so easy for Ali to compromise. The Sultan was also upset about the failure of the First Turkish-Egyptian War and refused to negotiate at the instigation of Britain. Now it was Ali's turn to worry 1,500 British troops, with the cooperation of 6,000 Turkish troops, captured the Acre fortress. The connection between Egypt and Syria was cut off, and the 70,000 Egyptian troops stationed in Syria were at risk of being annihilated. The four-nation fleet showed off its military power outside the port of Alexandria, and the Egyptian fleet in the port did not dare to fight at all. The four-nation fleet then destroyed the nearby coastal defense facilities, and demanded that Ali withdraw all the troops that invaded Syria and return the Turkish fleet. A response must be made within 24 hours, otherwise Alexandria would be bombarded and the Egyptian fleet would be completely destroyed. There were strong enemies outside, uprisings inside, and betrayal by allies, which made Ali, a 71-year-old man, fall into despair. He prayed for this every day, but it was meaningless. In the end, he could only surrender, accept the treaty, and withdraw his troops. When Egypt withdrew its troops, it was attacked by local guerrillas and Ottoman troops disguised as civilians. In addition, the Egyptian army suffered from cold and plague, as well as lack of water and food. The demoralized Egyptian army returned to Egypt a month later, but of the 70,000 Egyptian troops, only less than 40,000 were left. The Egyptian army was severely injured and unable to fight again. After the defeat, Egypt had to accept comprehensive sanctions. The Ottoman Sultan issued an edict, naming Ali as the ruler of Egypt, but exempted him from all positions in the Egyptian government. At the same time, Egypt was required to disband its army, and the number of troops should not exceed 18,000. The construction of warships was prohibited. All officer appointments must be approved by the Sultan. Egypt must pay a tribute of 80,000 bags of pias, £400,000, to the Ottoman Sultan every year. It was £8,000 before. The remaining 20 or so ships of the Egyptian navy were divided up by the Quadruple Alliance. Because the level of Egyptian warships was not high and could not meet the requirements of the British, the gun emplacements were directly dismantled and used as merchant ships. The Russians were also not interested in such inferior warships and sold them to the Ottomans. Only Austria and the Ottomans were fond of such free warships. Archduke Karl's youngest son, the commander of the Austrian navy, even held a welcoming ceremony at the naval port of Trieste and named all the spoils of war. It was impossible for a small army of 18,000 people to resist the invasion of Western colonists. The forces of Britain and France penetrated into Egypt frantically. At the same time, the most terrible thing was that Egypt lost its tariff autonomy, the constraints on foreign capital, and the monopoly of commodities. The latest novel was first published on the 69th book bar. Ali has been militaristic in recent years. Although he has opened a large number of factories, most of them are military industries. And civilian industries only account for a small part and the level is not high. Due to the limited size of the army, the military industry has lost its upward momentum. At the same time, due to the loss of the right to restrict Western merchants and the monopoly of various commodities, Western commodities rushed into Egypt frantically and knocked on the door of Egypt. After that, Britain and Austria jointly proposed to Egypt to adjust tariffs and cancel the discrimination against foreign merchants and commodities. Ali made concessions again under pressure, and Egypt's tariff was only 2.5%, only a quarter of the previous level. Egypt's national strength was severely weakened, and it became a semi-colonial country. Britain and France began a decades-long war for Egypt, and the Austrians were the biggest winners. They accidentally got a market where they could buy raw materials at low prices and dump garbage at the same time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Ali Pasha and the 40 Thieves. 3. Austria unexpectedly got a place to dump its goods. The unpalatable Hungarian food mixed with earthy smell, the crude Italian textiles, the textile industry in Lombardy and Venetia had a long history at that time, but it was relatively rough and behind the times, and the cheap industrial products from Bohemia all poured into the Egyptian market. During Ali's reign, the main development was military industry, and the light industry was very weak. It was originally protected by the national trade policy and could make profits and develop slowly. But after the tariff barriers were broken, Austria's cheap industrial and agricultural products completely destroyed Egypt's economy. In addition, Austria also had the advantage of distance. Britain had the strongest industrial strength, but the distance was too far and the cost was high. Moreover, British businessmen at this time were not very interested in a market with a population of less than 5 million. The Russians were also not very interested in the Egyptian market. As for Prussia, if it wanted to do business in Egypt, it would have to go around half of Europe first. As for the French, we can make money by collecting interest, so why do we have to work in person? Although Austria's industry is not strong among the European powers, it is a dimensionality reduction blow to Egypt, which has just westernized. Austrian goods are not only high quality but also low priced. Egypt's industry, once protected by Ali's monopoly policy, can be sold at high prices even if the quality is poor. Therefore, the long-term lack of competition has led to corruption in Egypt's state-owned factories, and officials of all sizes are embezzling national wealth. The products produced are very inferior, and the wages of ordinary workers are ridiculously low. Child workers in the factory only earn 0.6 piastres a day, and ordinary adult workers earn 1.2 piastres a day. Even so, their wages are often deducted. These workers usually do not enter the factory voluntarily, but are forcibly captured. They are kept in shacks near the factory and live a life more miserable than serfs. Take the textile industry as an example. The price of Austrian cloth in Egypt is 40 piastres. The cost of Egyptian textile factories is as high as 50 piastres, and the actual cost needs to add workers' wages, factory costs, and machine wear and tear. This makes the Egyptian cloth uncompetitive in the market. For a time, the Egyptian market was full of cheap Austrian goods, and the Egyptian industry was in danger. Ali had thought of a way. In his eyes, the Austrian Empire was just one of the younger brothers following Britain. He felt that he could not sit still and wait for death, and was determined to sell Egyptian goods to Vienna to fight a trade war with the Austrians. At this time, he still fantasized that he could rise again through trade to avenge the Turkish-Egyptian war. He invested at all costs, including continuing to borrow from France and embezzling treasury funds to subsidize factories. At the same time, he issued an order to forcibly conscript farmers into factories to work for the country. He hoped to get rid of dependence on foreign goods and save Egyptian industry. But when he pulled a ship of Egyptian industrial products to Venice, he found that this was far from the small puddle his advisors said. Most of Ali's advisors had studied in France and had seen the power of France. But they also learned their arrogance and thought that the Austrian Empire was a declining and ruined family. He now found that Austria's tariff was an absurdly high 12.5%, and what was even more absurd was that if he wanted to sell goods to Vienna, he had to pay tariffs twice, whether from the port of Venice or from Trieste. The two tariffs totaled as high as 25%, but merchants from other countries here were no longer surprised. Ali felt a little dizzy, and he wanted to sell the goods he brought at a low price. But he found that the merchants here were very picky and extremely inefficient. After being tortured for half a month, Ali finally returned to Egypt and looked at the red industrial deficit and the high interest required by the French. He couldn't help but spit blood on the ground. Austrian agricultural products brought an unexpected disaster to this country. The price of grain shipped from Austria was actually lower than that of Egyptian grain, which lowered the price of Egyptian merchants to purchase grain. As a result, a large number of Egyptian farmers went bankrupt, or switched to more profitable cash crops such as cotton. Egyptian farmers switched to cotton to increase their income, and they seemed to be happier than before during Ali's rule because they had money to buy food and clothes. However, the sharp reduction in arable land has made Egypt's food security a problem. How can people be happy in a country that cannot even guarantee food security? After that, a food crisis broke out in Austria, but it was the Egyptians who starved to death. In the past, due to Ali's policies, foreigners could not buy primary products, mainly cotton, directly from farmers, but could only buy them at high prices from the Egyptian government. But at this time, the discrimination against foreign merchants had disappeared, and Austrian merchants could directly obtain cheap raw materials from Egypt, transport them back to the country, and then make them into goods and sell them back to the Egyptians. In order to obtain enough foreign exchange to buy foreign goods, the Egyptians could only expand the export of raw materials, resulting in Egypt's high economic dependence on foreign countries and poor risk resistance. After the Austrians robbed Egypt of its industrial and agricultural vitality, Ali discovered that the entire Egypt had long been infiltrated by French capital. He thought the French had borrowed too much money, and so did his people. Now that Egypt was defeated, the French demanded an increase in interest rates, and he had to agree. The high interest rates made the Egyptians unable to raise their heads, and now the whole of Egypt is working for the French to repay their interest. At the same time, the French also proposed a crazy idea that they wanted to connect the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and Egypt would provide them with labor. France was not very satisfied with Prime Minister Matenai's approach this time. Prime Minister Matenai wanted to convene a meeting of European powers to discuss the security of the Ottoman Empire and the interests of various countries. Matenai wanted to continue to maintain the order of the Holy Spirit alliance and did not want to anger the Russians. However, it was counterproductive, and Nicholas I rejected Matenai's suggestion. The Russians only want to dominate the Near East and do not want to share their interests in the Near East with the great powers. The convening of the meeting will inevitably lead to Britain and France intervening, which the Russians do not want to see. The reason is the Treaty of Winker-i-Skelessi, which has been mentioned before and will be mentioned later. France secretly supports Egypt, hoping to act as a mediator to make an agreement between Turkey and Egypt, rather than for the European powers to divide the interests. Because the situation at the time was favorable to Egypt and France, the French did not want other powers to share his interests. The latest novel is published on the 6th-9th book bar. The spokesperson of the world's #1 troublemaker was very supportive of Meton's suggestion, because he knew that as long as the parliament was convened, European countries would inevitably argue over unequal interests. It would be best if Russia and Austria could turn against each other. After all, only these two major powers in the Near East directly bordered the Ottoman Empire and were most likely to have disagreements. Prime Minister Meton could only throw out a mediocre five-nation agreement, which was finally rejected by Ali. If the Austrian Navy had not insisted on sending troops, Prime Minister Meton might still be worried about whether to act in conjunction with the British. Prime Minister Meton's hesitation ultimately led to the British taking the lead in this Near East crisis. He played the role of Britain's younger brother, and Austria's international influence was weakened for the first time since 1815. At the same time, the attitude of the Russians also caused resentment among the top leaders of the Austrian Empire, which broke out in another Near East crisis more than a decade later. Our Prime Minister did not want to offend the British or the Russians. In fact, he could just throw the ball to the Russians, let them quarrel, and then Austria would mediate. As for the question of whether the Russians would dominate the Middle East, they would never tolerate such a situation as long as the British were still around. Chapter 50 Ali Pasha and the 40 Thieves. 4. Austria was not the only country that felt it had made a profit. During the Second Turkish-Egyptian War, Russian Foreign Minister Neschel proposed to the Tsar to abandon the Treaty of Ankara-Skelessi in order to improve Anglo-Russian relations. Tsar Nicholas I agreed with his opinion and asked him to implement a new Near East policy and ally with Britain, Russia's biggest enemy. The Russians expressed their willingness to work with Britain to resolve the Near East crisis and promised not to extend the Treaty of Ankara-Skelessi. Palmerston naturally had no reason to refuse. Later, when France declared its privileges in the Near East, Russia and Britain successfully defeated France and turned the European alliance into an anti-French alliance. However, after a short honeymoon period, the British single-handedly concocted the Straits Convention to place the Strait of Bosnia under international co-management, preventing any power from controlling the strait alone and then controlling Constantinople and the Ottoman Empire. The advantages that Russia had established in several Russo-Turkish wars since the 18th century became the advantages of the European powers. At this time, Russia was like an ignorant girl who met an old hooligan in a bar. The girl felt that they were related, but the old rogue felt embarrassed. The Russians underestimated the contradictions between Britain and Russia on the Eastern issue, and at the same time offended France and had a grudge with Austria. But at this time, Russia still felt that it had made a lot of money. It successfully prevented France from declaring privileges in the Near East and also established relations with Britain. In the eyes of the Russians, as long as Britain and Russia joined forces, they would be invincible in the world, and the Three Emperors alliance was far less powerful than this. But in the eyes of the British, what exactly is this Russian girl? The Ottomans finally avenged the First Turkish-Egyptian War. They taught Ali, the traitor, and his army a good lesson. They restored their rule over Egypt in legal terms. At the same time, they could not only receive Ali Pasha's personal annual tribute, £400,000, but also obtained the right to extract layers from Egyptian taxes. Every year, the Egyptian government must pay 25% of the taxes collected to the Ottoman Sultan. To a certain extent, the fiscal revenue of the Ottoman Empire increased. After Ali was suppressed, the Ottoman Empire maintained its great power dignity. After the Straits Convention, the Ottomans maintained a 10-year period of peaceful development, and had a chance to survive. The change from being controlled by Russia to being controlled by European powers also gave the Ottomans a new opportunity, that is, to play with the interests between countries and gain a glimmer of hope for themselves. The Ottomans also recovered the previously lost areas such as Syria, which gave people a false sense of revival. The Ottomans felt that they had also gained a lot. The real winner was the British, who first excluded France to weaken its influence in the Near East, and at the same time seized the leadership of the Near East crisis from Austria to enhance their own influence. The Russians abandoned the Treaty of Ankara-Skelessi and used the Straits Convention to turn Russia's hegemony over the Straits into international co-management, making the efforts of several generations of Tsars in vain. The subsequent Crimean War made Russia lose the title of European gendarme and became a laughingstock in Europe. The British successfully infiltrated the economy and politics of Egypt and Syria in the Near East, and found a new source of raw materials for the British textile industry. This ensured that the source of raw materials for the British textile industry was safe and no longer dependent on North American cotton imports. The fruits of Ali Pasha's lifelong struggle were divided up by the robbers. In 1844, Egypt's debt had reached 80 million francs, and Ali Pasha smashed all the utensils he could see crazily. For 6 days, his anger was not calmed down, and he finally fainted in his palace. When the food crisis broke out in Austria and the whole of Europe in 1848, the Egyptians had money but could not buy anything. The hungry people remembered this former leader, but Ali Pasha was already unconscious and could no longer contribute to his country. Egypt's income could no longer repay the interest on the debt. The country faced bankruptcy and was eventually occupied by the British Army in 1882. Ali Pasha's last legacy was also taken away by the British. Some people say Ali built a palace, but it was indeed the whole of Egypt that was destroyed, Egyptian proverb. In fact, Ali Pasha's reform in the face of this unprecedented change in 1,000 years was very successful in terms of effect. The Ottoman Empire, the suzerain state that was defeated, ceded land and sought peace. But he failed in diplomacy. His unrestrained expansion destroyed the interests of Western powers in the Near East, and eventually aroused their disgust and fear. In the end, he was taught a lesson by the powerful ships and guns of the powers, and his political and economic interests were divided up by the powers. Franz drew a circle on the shortest part of the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. I don't know how much the British and French can pay for it. Franz's expression was half smile, and he sat in the study with information sent everywhere around him. On the side was Sarah, who was eating a lollipop and helping with the accounts. Sarah had developed many new ways to eat lollipops, such as licking, turning, holding, and biting. She was no longer an amateur who wanted to knock the candy off with a hammer. The account book of Archduke Karl's family industry had to be pulled by a carriage. No wonder his subordinates didn't take him, the Archduke, seriously. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. For example, Archduke Karl's restaurant in Prague actually consumed 26 baskets of pepper in a year. This is equivalent to 1,500 kilograms of pepper a year. What are they doing? Are they making pepper bombs? They are not afraid of choking to death. Someone was sent to find the supplier, and it turned out to be the brother-in-law of the restaurant manager. In addition, Archduke Karl has 5 ironworks of similar size, all of which are a foundry, a mechanical processing workshop, equipped with 3 lathes and drilling machines, as well as 6 planers, bolt lathes and stamping machines. All of them extract raw materials from their own coal mines and iron mines. The output is almost the same, but the profits are very different. The one with the highest income can provide the Archduke with 420,000 guilders of income each year, while the worst one can only hand over 80,000 guilders of income each year. The farmland of Archduke Karl and the farmland of the Taffy family are also located in Moravia. The farmland of Archduke Karl is even larger in area, but the harvest recorded in the account book is only a little more than half of that of the Taffy family. Franz thought of the big, dignified old man. He rubbed his eyebrows and said to himself, he doesn't look very smart, but he hasn't ruined the family. This family is really rich. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.